Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Planning Committee meeting. My name is Liz Schell. I'm Councillor for Portsmouth, but Chair of this committee. We have with us Councillor Neal, who is the Vice Chair, Councillor McLaren, Councillor Osanek, and Councillor Allen. Councillor Turner is away this evening, so it's all just us. We have a number of staff here this evening, and I'll start with our Commissioner, Ms. Hurdle, and then starting on this side to the left is Manager Vendetti, Manager Forfar, Planner Diedrichsen, Planner Argobal, and Manager Newman, and our Clerk, Clerk Blumenberg. Tonight we have a number of public meetings, and before we start any public meeting, I have a notice of collection that I will be reading. Personal information collected as a result of this public hearing and on the forms provided at the back of the room is collected under the authority of the Planning Act and will be used to assist in making a decision on this matter. All names, addresses, opinions, and comments may be collected and may form part of the minutes, which will be available to the public. Questions regarding this collection should be forwarded to the Director of Planning, Building, and Licensing Services. The purpose of public meetings is to present planning applications in a public forum as required by the Planning Act. Following presentations by the applicant, committee members will be afforded an opportunity to ask questions for clarification or further information. The meeting will then be opened to the public for comments and questions. Interested persons are requested to give their name and address for recording in the minutes. There is also a sign-in sheet for interested members of the public at the back of the room. No decisions are made at public meetings concerning applications unless otherwise noted. The public meeting is held to gather public opinion. Exemption to this rule is outlined in Bylaw number 2006-75 to delegate various planning approvals to staff and to adopt certain procedures for the processing of planning applications subject to delegated authority. Council has authorized staff to use discretion in determining if an application can be a combined public meeting comprehensive report to expedite the approval process. There are none of these on the agenda this evening. Information gathered at public meetings is then referred back to the Planning, Building, and Licensing Services staff for the preparation of a comprehensive report and recommendation to Planning Committee. This means that after the meeting tonight, staff will be considering the comments made by the public in their further review of the applications. When this review is completed, a report will be prepared making a recommendation for action to this committee. The recommendation is typically to approve with conditions or to deny. This committee then makes a recommendation on the applications to City Council. City Council has the final say on the applications from the city's perspective. Following council decision, notice will be circulated in accordance with the Planning Act, and anyone with an interest in this matter may file an appeal. Interested persons are advised that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of council to the Ontario Municipal Board unless, in the opinion of the board, there are reasonable grounds to do so. Thank you, and I will now open our first public meeting, and this is an application for zoning bylaw amendment 556 Princess Street, and Mr. Toh will be presenting.
Right. Thank you. So my name is Mark Tao. I'm a planner with IBI Group. This application in the public meeting is for an application for official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 556 Princess Street. So the applications are being filed to support an addition to an existing building, which is currently a boarding house, to allow for a 3-unit residential dwelling. The subject property is at 556 Princess Street, which is located on the south side of Princess between Frontenac Street and Alfred Street. The parcel itself is quite small, approximately 247 square meters and about 9.7 meters of frontage. This site plan is an update to what was submitted originally, which had an incorrect property boundary. So just on the screen over here, the property boundary is outlined in the solid red line. There's a shared right-of-way that's made up of two parts. One part is on the subject property, and then the other part is on the abutting property. So that's a shared right-of-way. The existing building the existing building encroaches onto the portion of the right-of-way on that property, or on the property that the building is located on. Based on our property search records, it appears that that building has been encroaching for a number of years. The early 1900s was the earliest that we could find in terms of the location of the building. The surrounding uses are a mix of commercial, being on Princess Street in Williamsville, residential to the south, and the neighborhood to the south, and also a number of community services, including the abutting property. This is an image of the property. The top image is the picture from the front, and the bottom picture is the image of the rear. It's the building on the left at the top and the right at the bottom. You can see there's an existing 2.5-story dwelling of a similar size or similar height abutting it. The area that the subject lot occupies is 100% asphalt right now, with the exception of these stairs. So what's proposed is an addition that would extend that area, or extend the building back towards the rear of the property line. So they said the property was recently purchased by the current owners when they purchased it, it was a boarding house. It's since been vacated, and they're proposing to convert it into a 3-unit building. Part of that is to add a 240 square foot GFA in terms of the total gross floor area addition onto the rear of the building. Minor modifications will be made to the exterior of the existing building, and the interior of the existing building will be gutted and totally redone. The required parking for the 3 units is proposed to be provided off-site. I'll show an image of where that is shortly. So the site plan just shows the footprint of the existing building with the lot line and dashed around here, and then the proposed addition at the rear. And the last 30 square meters of the property is proposed to be amenity space, which I'll talk about in a minute. So with respect to the official plan, it's designated Main Street Commercial in the official plan, along with all the other properties along Princess Street in this area in Williamsville. The official plan amendment is specifically to seek relief from the rear yard angular plane policies. So the policy outlined in the red box identifies that any new development should be masked so that it doesn't overshadow adjacent existing development. And this comes out of the Williamsville Main Street study, which spoke to protecting the neighborhoods to the north and south from shadow impacts, et cetera, overlook due to new construction along Princess Street. So in order to achieve that, the policy indicates that generally a 45-degree angle should be maintained from the rear property line. So in this case, there's a rather, this actually, sorry, is an illustration, I guess, of the intent of the Williamsville study. So showing, this picture here shows a theoretical new building on Princess Street being here, and this is the neighborhood in behind. And so the intention is to provide a setback from that neighborhood to the rear of any new building, with the setback being dictated by a 45-degree angular plane. So that would prevent, the intention is to prevent overshadowing, privacy impacts on those existing residential uses off of Princess Street. So because of the somewhat odd lot fabric that the subject property is surrounded by, the property doesn't meet this 45-degree setback from the rear, 45-degree angular plane from the rear property line, which is here. The property associated with 558 Princess Street actually wraps in behind the property, which that property actually abuts the rear residential line along here. So in terms of the intent of the official plan in the Williamsville study, to make sure that new buildings don't encroach too closely to the residential neighborhood, the 45-degree angular plane is more than met when measured from the edge of the abutting residential neighborhood. The proposed height of the building is 9.1 meters, which to achieve the 45-degree angular plane means it would have to be set back 9.1 meters from the rear property line. In this case, the effect of the odd property fabric is that the building will be set back to achieve the 45-degree angular plane from the abutting residential neighborhood. So in our opinion, the intent of the OP is satisfied in this. So with respect to the OP, we believe it's compatible with adjacent uses. It's not anticipated to create adverse effects. It meets the functional needs of site users and increases the utility of the developed parcel in the urban boundary. And the request is consistent with the intent of the OP. With respect to zoning, it's zoned Williamsville Main Street Commercial with a holding on it. The holding is specifically just for servicing capacity. So a servicing study was done to demonstrate that there is appropriate services in the area to support the proposed expansion. Relief is being requested, as with the official plan, for the rear angular plane and for the rear yard setback. Off-site parking is also being proposed. Off-site parking is a permitted use, which I'll get into later, but the distances from the subject site is slightly greater than what's permitted. Also a reduction to the amenity space, projections into front yards, which is an existing condition. So rear yard setback, similar to what I just described with the official plan, proposing to reduce the rear yard from 9.1 meters to 3.4 meters, again, with respect to the angular plane. The setback provides the adequate separation from the residential neighborhood. With respect to off-site parking, the bylaw permits off-site parking to be within 60 meters. The subject property is proposed to use off-site parking within about 125-meter walking distance along the sidewalks to this property on the north side of Princess at 353 Alfred Street. With respect to amenity space, the City of Kingston had recently initiated conducted a study on appropriate amenity space in support of upcoming zoning bylaw review. One of the recommendations from that study was that 10 square meters per dwelling unit in the Main Street corridor areas along Princess Street was appropriate. So we proposed that 10 square meters per dwelling unit be proposed, and obviously the site is quite tight, constrained. So what kind of amenity space or what quality of amenity space can be provided in that area? And I've recently been in Toronto and for various different things, and I was actually amazed by this alley patio associated with this restaurant. So they had a variety of tables and chairs set up associated with this restaurant down the side alley, and it actually seemed like quite a viable, nice place to be. So along those lines, in terms of supporting the amenity space proposed, the applicants have the ability to create spaces such as these here, which are approximately similar size, so fencing off the area and then doing creative landscaping to create a quality space, though small, within the urban area for the residents, and certainly better than the space that's there right now, which is essentially just a parking lot. Projections into front yards, the new existing entrance proposed to be maintained. The access to stairs, the railings are proposed to be replaced and upgraded for improved access. Again, the holding symbol lift is just with respect to servicing. So servicing report was done that supported the additional floor space. So in conclusion, we believe the request is consistent with the PPS. The zoning amendment conforms to the official plan policies and is compatible with existing land uses. And so we request that when the time comes, the Planning Committee recommend the applications for approval to Council. Thank you.
Could I hear from staff, please?
Oh, thanks, Mr. Chair, or Mrs. Chair, sorry. As per the Planning Act, the notice requirements were met.
Thank you. And did you receive any correspondence?
Yes, I received 2 submissions from the public.
And members of the committee, do you have some questions? Councillor Neal?
I thought he put his hand up first, but I'll jump in first. I do have several questions. There's just 2 that I'd like to ask now and then reserve the right to ask others if they aren't asked by the public. Could you go back to the picture of the rear yard, if you would? Yeah. I'm assuming that the angular plane in the front, because you aren't altering or adding to the height of the building in that location, is an existing non-conforming use. You don't need to meet the height, the angular plane in the front.
Yeah, so
But-
it's not legal non-complying, it's complying, I guess, because it's not above the height where an angular plane requirement would kick in for the front.
Okay, I guess my concern is, and I've walked the site, and the distance between the building and the building to the west, which has a larger footprint right now, and we can see bedroom windows because they were built when renovations took place. They were built to code, building code, and windows were put in on the bedrooms. If you extend back from, as you're proposing, you'll virtually take away any sunlight and you'll take away any view from those windows. Those windows will be less than my arm's length away from a solid wall. That's giving me some reluctance with the proposal. So, and also, as I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the angular plane that you're taking from the Frontenac or Alfred Street abutting properties, not from the abutting property of your neighbor to the west. So in fact, you're using some of their property to say that you're meeting the angular plane provision. And again, that's giving me a little bit of discomfort because that virtually will affect the utility of their property in the event that they wish to develop it in the future. If you can address those couple of questions, and I'll reserve the other questions and comments for later.
You know, both good points. So with respect to the building to the west, 558 Princess Street, this is a challenge with infill development, and the current zoning permits 0 meter side setbacks. So any building that gets built can essentially butt right up on the property line regardless of what's there from a planning perspective on the other property line. There is requirements for fire separation. So you'll see actually on this existing building what I believe are what's called fire shutters. So it's these boxes kind of above the windows so that in the event of a fire, the building or that opening will be closed to prevent fire from entering that adjacent property. So the same thing would have to go on any abutting building with the openings in the walls as well. So yeah, in terms of the impacts, yes, it is an existing building. I guess just the zoning as of right permits this to happen. So in terms of building back right up next to the wall, 0 meter lot lines in urban areas are what's permitted typically. So I imagine that at the building permit stage, whether there needs to be an adjustment or separation there, that might be something that gets dealt with through the technical comments, which we're awaiting from staff. So I think through that process, there may be some comments from a building or fire code perspective. So that's, in terms of that, that's all I have to offer there. With respect to the rear angular plane, so I'll go back to the OP policies. So the intent, these are images again from the Williamsville Main Street study. So the intent of the study is essentially to provide an 8 meter wide, minimum 8 meter wide laneway along the rear of properties, and then any building beyond that has to meet the 45-degree angular plane. So even if the adjacent property owner were to try to develop the rest of their property in around here, the distance between their rear property line and the neighborhood property line, I guess, in behind is slightly more than 8 meters as it is. So their ability to actually develop in this area under the current zoning and official plan is limited. So the fact that this property, I guess, is able to benefit from that separation distance doesn't have any impact on the ability of this adjacent property owner to develop their property. If the 45-degree angular plane is met, then it doesn't matter if it's on this property or on the adjacent property.
So it is being met using your neighbor's property line.
I guess if the intent of the plan in the Williamsville study is to create a separation distance between the neighborhood and the buildings that are constructed. So in this case, the property intervening is not owned by this property owner, it's owned by somebody else, but it doesn't, I guess, have an impact on the other person's property. It doesn't have the impact on the owner of 558 Princess Street in terms of whether that setback is met or not. Because their ability to develop their property is subject to the same constraints as this one.
Councillor Allen?
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. I also had the window question, but my sense of the Williamsville Main Street study and our official plan is that Princess Street, our goal is to have ground floor commercial taking place there. And I don't see anything in the zoning or in that you're requesting here that sets up the ability to convert to commercial in the future on the ground floor, or to establish should that come along. And we've seen a few applications come through where we've done that on Brock Street and elsewhere. And so I'm wondering if that's something that's been considered in this plan. As we build up Williamsville, we're going to see more demand for that ground floor commercial, and this is a great place to integrate that.
Yeah, it's I guess an area that over time is going to shift and create these spaces. I think a lot of the properties that you see that have existing development on them, particularly ones like this that are particularly small, the ability in and of themselves to kind of create or fulfill the vision for the area in terms of continuous street wall, ground floor commercial, upper floor residential, is something that's going to happen over time. The existing property here has a boarding house use, has traditionally been a boarding house use, and the proposal is to, likely as an interim use. I can't imagine the highest and best use for this property and these parcels along here in general may be to that, go back to these pictures here. You're right, this is not, I think, the type of development that's envisioned for the Williamsville area. I think over time, the intention is, and that is, I guess, the intention of planning documents, official plans, for example, that over time, these uses will transition to what's planned for the area. So in the interim, what do you do with those properties? There is a lot of available commercial space along Princess Street, and I'm not sure if converting this for commercial would necessarily be a viable opportunity versus using it as a residential use in the interim until some higher and greater use is used for the property or the surrounding properties in terms of a land consolidation. So all I could say, I guess the residential use now is permitted and is proposed to continue for the interim. But hopefully over time, this area, as the area develops, it will support commercial on the ground floor, commercial uses in general. So, yeah.
Councillor McLaren.
Thank you. I'm concerned about the loss of amenity space. I saw that you made it really nice, but it seems like a failure of imagination to be able to design like half a new building there and not be able to employ the proper standards. Like, I understand that these standards were developed in consultation with the industry and with the best interests of the people who are going to live there. Is there no way, like, is there really no way that an imaginative architect could come up with a way that it could be actually achieving the proper amount of amenity space?
So, just for clarification through you, Madam Chair, which standards were you referring to?
The new standards, you're asking for relief from the amount of amenity space, are you not?
No, we're complying with what's recommended in terms of 10 square meters per dwelling unit.
Oh, okay, my apologies, I misunderstood that.
It is I will acknowledge though in relation, it is a challenging site, and infill is, how do you do, especially on smaller sites, how do you provide amenity space in a way that's usable and is actually going to be used and not just become a dumping ground for garbage or, whatever. So I think it creates, or it means that the developers, particularly of smaller sites such as this, have to be very intentional about creating and programming amenity space so that it is going to be used as amenity space. And particularly on a site like this, that's going to be one of the things that the developer is going to have to pay particular attention to when they implement that. But we do want to stick within what was recommended for the 30 square meters, and that's how it's been laid out. And we will work with staff through the layouts, because there will be some changes coming about how the site will be laid out.
Just a very short follow-up to the previous comment about amenity space. I guess the flaw for me is that it's the same amount of amenity space per unit, and you're developing 5-bedroom units, likely to be student occupied in all likelihood. So 5 adults will have 2 square meters each of amenity space within your plan.
10 square meters each.
10 square meters per unit.
Yes.
So what I'm saying is that each unit will have 5 adults, so each adult will have access to 2 square meters of amenity space. That's the...
Yeah. Which is the standard that was recommended, recognizing that there's the mix of units and recognizing that not everybody will use the amenity space at the same time.
I think we'd be better served counting bedrooms and not counting units, personally, but...
Thank you. This is just a reminder that everyone who's arrived, if you want to get more information as this process continues, be sure to sign in at the back, the paper on the table. And Memorial Hall is open if anyone would like to take a seat in Memorial Hall and then come into the room when the public meeting you're interested in takes place. So that's an offer to you. And now we've heard from the committee, and I'd like to go to members of the public. Are there any members of the public who would like to ask questions or have concerns about this application? I will ask you to give your name and address, and the limit is a 5-minute limit. And I see Mr. Dixon.
Frank Dixon, 495 Alfred, Apartment 2, K7K4J4. Madam Chair, committee members, staff, fellow citizens, and media and planners. I've got 3 points that I'd like to raise. The report does not currently explain how many dwelling units are in the existing building. I live about 6 blocks away, and I walk by there quite often, so I know the building. So I think that's a major omission, because we don't know the increase in density that we're going to be asked to approve, if the committee's going to be asked to approve, if that information is lacking. I would say that's unprofessional from a planner standpoint, not including that. You had every chance to obtain that. My second question has to do with the angular plane topic that's already been raised, and I'm wondering if you could put up the policy context slide again. It's part of your presentation, because I have a further question. Yeah, right there, that one, thank you. Back one. Yeah, right there. Okay, so Right now, you're indicating there's a 14-meter separation between the back of the proposed expanded unit and the red line marking, I think it's 453 Frontenac Street. And then you have a jagged, sort of a triangular property line at the back. What I'm wondering about is the distance from the further west corner as proposed to the jut-out triangular plane. Is that still within the margin? It appears as if it would be based on the drawing, but I just wanted to ask about that. And then my third point has also been raised, and it has to do with the blocking of the windows, which the proposed addition would impose upon the dwelling to the west immediately. Thank you.
Thank you. I will see if there are other people who wish to speak before I'll ask Mr. Toe to respond. Yes?
Hi, my name is Trina Garrison, and sorry, address, is that what you needed? 16 Glenwood Court in Kingston. I'm actually the property owner at 558 Princess Street, and I'd just like to make some comments to the committee, as well as any members in attendance from the public. I'm going to be submitting, I've already submitted a written document to the planner, and I will certainly be adding to that. We have many concerns, not just as a property owners who abut next door, but just also in terms of what appears to be met and the amount of relief that's being asked in this particular proposal that's been put forward. I'd just like to mention a couple of things that come to mind as I listen to the presentation from the people regarding 556 Princess Street. I think that one of the large issues certainly is that it was confirmed tonight that there is encroachment of the right-of-way that particular property is subjected to. And I would just simply like to make the committee aware that not only did the existing building back, it was mentioned early 1900s encroach, within maybe about the last 5 years, the building, which is brick underneath, you can see it on the west side of the building still, it's still there. On the east side, the previous owners had that strapped and then sided, which further encroaches into the right-of-way. I would certainly like to think that if there's any plan approved at the end of the day that deals with construction, that the building be stripped back as far as possible in order to lessen the encroachment to the greatest extent that can be in meeting the requirements to honor the right-of-way. It was also mentioned that the building at 556 Princess at the front and what is proposed for the extension is similar in height to the building at 558 Princess Street, and that's absolutely incorrect. Maybe photos don't exactly show that, but if you go stand on the ground without me measuring it, I don't know the height, but it's certainly much higher. And so therefore, not only will we be subjected at 558 Princess Street to overshadowing, but we'll be even further subjected to a height that's way above us to start with. 558 Princess Street will never see the light of day if this goes forward. It's also been mentioned in a number of the documents and the proposals, the verbal, that the building is vacated and ready for renovations to house new housing as per the proposal, when in fact that building is absolutely not vacated, has never been, and is still not today as we stand here. It's still occupied by residents of the boarding house. On that note, I'd also like to maybe raise the question that there's information from CMHC quoted in the application that suggests that housing is required in Kingston, that the vacancy rate is low. I just had a quick look this afternoon at data released in the CMHC fall report for the CMA for Kingston, which states on the highlights, Kingston's vacancy rate has moved up to 2.8% this year, which is 2015, compared to 1.9% last year. What we see there is, in fact, an increase in vacancy and units that are, in fact, available. I'd also like to mention that, well, perhaps I'd love to see an improvement in the property at 556 Princess Street. At the same time, the proposal lends itself to removing boarding housing, which is an absolute need in the Kingston region as well. What we do is eliminate that, and to the current person's comments, I agree wholeheartedly. We have no idea what it currently houses, so we don't know what increase is proposed versus what loss would be incurred for other types of housing that are there now. The parking, because it's so far away, which would also require approval, just due to distance, lends itself to there's no parking on the street anymore in front of the building on Princess Street. People cannot encumber the right of way with their vehicles, so there's no parking beside the building. There will not be any parking provided on site at the rear of the building. Hence, all these people are going to do is trespass when they're delivering their groceries, when they're moving in and out, when visitors come to see them, and it's just not a positive for anybody nearby. The angular plane requirement, I'm going to ask that the committee please enforce it. I don't understand, even based on the questions and explanations still this evening. If we look at the rear of the building, you can show me all the sketches you like. The bottom line is in order to accept what's been proposed by 556 Princess proposal, they're using my backyard. I don't think that the intent of the Williamsville district policies are to allow me to use the neighbor's backyard when I don't meet it. I have a backyard at 558 Princess Street that will be negatively impacted by overshadowing significantly, and I'd like to hope that those policies will be kept to protect my backyard. I would also like to ask that the committee consider not just the angular plane in the rear yard, but the effect that it will have on the east side of the building at 558 Princess Street. We did major renovation. It's nice living inside. The effect that it will have, it's a 6-unit residential building. The proposal as it stands will have the effect of major overshadowing of every unit in our building. 10% amenity, I don't care if it comes in the form of a piece of pavement where they can go and play basketball or what it offers. Because you throw grass down and suggest that that's better, I believe that the area itself is not satisfactory. The new front entrance, I don't understand what's been proposed, and maybe what I'll mention, again, I've already raised with the planner, is that there isn't any information that's up to date on a survey. What's been asked to be entertained is all based on old information that does not reflect the current circumstances on the ground at the site. The new front entrance, I don't understand how it will be anything except intruding out into the walkway, the sidewalks on Princess Street. From a safety point of view, I don't believe it's good. The exit on the east side of the building basically exits out into the right-of-way, which is heavily used by vehicle traffic for not just 558 Princess Street, but also the building on the east side, which is commercial, and it's very active. The main floor commercial space has never been occupied. If one peeks in the front windows of the building at any time, to my knowledge, I don't know that the Williamsville plan is to abandon commercial street front, because if you do that now, you'll never get it back again. And I just believe, my personal feeling, certainly due to this and many other reasons that I won't go on tonight, I'll submit it in writing, is that infill to this extent is not what we're looking for here in the city. We're not Toronto, at least not yet, and it's just not appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and you do have that for the clerk to add to our information. Yes, thank you. Are there any other people? Yes, would you like to take a microphone, please?
Hi, Joan Bowley, 414 Albert Street. I just have a question. The Williamsville Main Street study has been referred to many times this evening, and I'm just curious, at what point in time does the urban design checklist Appendix C of the study come into play? It covers many of the items that have been talked about, but it also has further items. So that's just a question for planning and/or the developer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak or have questions? Oh, yes, please come to the microphone. Hi. There's a little button that if you push the light will turn red. There you go.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Margaret Zackos, 185 Ontario. I represent Axion Development. We own the property 544, 552, 554, and 336 Alfred, which is that large building that appears. And I know the neighborhood well, as we've owned that building for many, many years. You probably recognize it as IBM, then OpenText and Andine, and now Frontenac Community Mental Health Services and the federal government are in it. And they've really brought a lot of people into the neighborhood, and they enjoy and are looking forward to the changes in the neighborhood. The property as it exists is an eyesore, and I don't think anyone would state otherwise. So improvement to that's wonderful. I think what we're discussing is the type of improvement. And I did submit a letter, and I will relook the design. My first concern were the property lines were inaccurate, and so I look forward to a revised building design. I think there are a number of safety issues along with the encroachment. One of the issues this design highlights for me is what will go on in the Williamsville area in terms of support areas. There's no place for bicycles. There's no place for garbage. So you now have 15 people in that building. Are they keeping their garbage within the building? There is city garbage service, so it will be picked up. I think the idea with all the bicycle lanes was there'd be bicycles, but there's no place for them to place their bicycles. And they certainly aren't going to leave them on a lot that's distant from the building. So I think there are a number of operational concerns. Certainly exiting onto any of the traffic areas created by my building and the other adjacent building. It's a very active parking lot. The people who occupy the building serve the community, and they're in and out with their cars on community-based appointments. That activity does not change in the evening. There are community support groups that are run within that space, and including on weekends, so that the activity level there does not, well, it decreases, but it's not absent. Given the size of the structure they're putting, technically, I don't know how it's going to be built without closing down the parking for my building, and that I sent this to the tenants in the building, and that was their first concern. Given that the building is already encroaching on the property line, there isn't even a right-of-way large enough for a vehicle to go down that strip of land, technically, let alone a construction truck or anything else. But it would severely impact the operations of both tenants in the adjacent building. And I also am concerned about the size of the amenity space with the number of people in the building, and would mirror the earlier comment that having one unit where one's a one-bedroom and one's a five-bedroom, I think creates a different demand. And those are my highlights, and anything else I will put in writing, and I thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak to this application? Then I'll ask Mr. Toh to respond to a number of the issues that were raised.
Thank you to those who provided comments and questions. Infill is always a challenging thing and can create lots of concern and questions, and it is more challenging certainly than greenfield development because of the tightness and the compactness of urban lots and urban spaces. So with respect to the first question, the existing boarding house, to my knowledge, it was vacated, but if it's not, then my apologies for that. So it is just a single unit. It works as boarding houses typically work as a single housekeeping unit, I guess. So there's one unit, one boarding house unit, I guess, if you want to put it in that terms. There's no other separations within there. With respect to the angular plane in the rear, yes, it doesn't kind of catch that corner Mr. Dixon asked the question about. According to the survey, the line is parallel, so it tracks along this line, so it's fully within this area in terms of that setback from, and not from this corner here that juts out. With respect to the right-of-way encroachment and the property boundaries, so the information that we have and that we've been able to obtain indicates that the existing building is fully on the property of 556 Princess Street. It doesn't encroach onto an adjacent property. It does, however, encroach onto a right-of-way that's in favor of the adjacent property owned by Axion to the east. So there is that existing encroachment that's been there for 100+ years. I'm not sure what kind of exterior renovations are proposed, if any, in terms of the depth of siding worsening any encroachment, but I think that's something that can be worked out between the property owners if and when the time comes. With respect to heights, the Williamsville Main Street study requires a minimum height, I believe, of 10.5 meters. Requires a minimum height of 10.5 meters. So the subject property the building on the subject property is less than that. The adjacent property is 2.5 stories, and the existing property is approximately 3 to 3.5, depending on the grade. So it is slightly taller than the adjacent property, but in terms of impacts from shadowing and overlook within an urban area, it's not something that we normally categorize as being obtrusive or having a negative impact. With respect to shadowing on the rear yard of the property to the west, 558 Princess Street, the rear yard is south of the subject property, so any sun shade effects, if any, would be limited to the summertime when the sun does travel further north. But the rear yard of 558 Princess Street is entirely behind this property, so in terms of shadowing, due to the building extending out further on any rear yards, we don't anticipate that would be the case. With respect to the amenity space provided, usefulness of it, as I said, it is a challenge. Originally, the applicants were proposing 6 units, and they reduced it to 3 units. So 6 units is what, as the adjacent property owner said, is what's in her building. So the applicants proposed to reduce it down to 3 units instead of 6, with similar GFA in terms of the total floor area. And I mean, I note that the 558 Princess Street is primarily paved as well, so there does seem to be a lack of quality amenity space in the area, not just on this property. So hopefully through this redevelopment, there will be good amenity space provided as part of the redevelopment. In terms of front steps without encroaching, obviously any new development wouldn't encroach out into the right-of-way. It's just reworking what they have right now to make it more accessible. In terms of exiting onto the right-of-way, as you'll see in the bottom picture here, the rear doors from the existing unit exit out into the rear yard, and then the occupants, if they leave through these doors, would have to travel up the shared right-of-way. So it is a shared right-of-way in favor of both this property and the adjacent property, so they do have a right to travel it, whether it's pedestrians or vehicles. So it is a shared right-of-way, and that is the nature of those types of situations where there is going to be users from both properties making use of the space. With respect to the urban design studies from the Williamsville Main Street study, does it apply? I appreciate the question, and certainly for any new development, urban design studies, either standalone or implemented through the OP, would certainly apply. It's a challenge with existing developments, and primarily with urban design, it's the properties or the parts of the property that are front-facing the public realm that are of most concern. So, because the building is proposed to remain with some just cosmetic alterations, there isn't an opportunity at this point for a whole lot of change with respect to the urban design, but hopefully that would come as part of the future longer-term redevelopment of this area. With respect to bicycle and garbage storage, there is a basement in the unit. It's not a finished basement by any means, but I understand from the owners that it can be used for garbage and bicycle storage, accessible from the inside of the unit or directly from the outside. The intention was to provide a common entrance at the side where people could enter and exit the building, including access to garbage storage and bicycle storage in the basement. And with respect to construction on the site, again, that's one of those challenges of urban infill, so that will certainly be a matter that the owners will have to discuss with the adjacent property owners in terms of seeing if that is something that can be contemplated. I know the owners are going to be in contact with the adjacent property owner about some of these matters, so hopefully they'll be able to work through those things. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Further questions, comments? Councillor Neal?
Yes, some of my points have been covered, but I just wanted to quickly go over. I've heard from a couple of sources now that there's some question about the presumed survey lines that the developer has put forward. Will there be another survey that might better meet the understanding of the survey of the adjacent properties? Because clearly there are lines that it appears to be already some encroachment on, but I think we need to be assured that those property lines are accurate, that are being reflected in the report. I've already talked about the window blockage. Typically, because we do concurrent site planning at the same time, and that makes sense as we're doing this, typically the chair allows for some leeway in asking questions that are related to site plan. I'm concerned with waste management, and I'm concerned with such a narrow easement and the fact that your building is already encroaching on that easement. I'm a little troubled by the idea of doors opening and closing onto that easement for both garbage, for entrance and exit, for moving bikes in and out. So that seems to me to be problematic. So I know you have a shared easement on the east. The owners do they have a shared easement with your neighbors between Salvation Army, Harbor Lights, and your immediate neighbors to the west? Or so I'm curious about that. You mentioned off-site parking on Alfred Street, which I believe is a J. Patry building. I guess my concern there is I've spoken to another developer who is proposing the same site, and the suggestion is that it's about to be bought for a development adjacent. So I just want to flag that for staff to make sure that we aren't double dipping on parking with two different developments claiming the same parking availability. Now, the higher use in future interests me because I know, and I'm not sure, you may have been the planner on the Super 8 project, but I know the phase 2, there's an allowance for the fact that it's going to be allowable residential initially, but part of the consideration for that was that the ceiling height, the entrances, and the window treatment, and that would be such that it would be easily transferable to the higher use commercial at a future date. And this is a question to either our planners or to you. Are we foreseeing that possibility of higher use, which I think is the Williamsville plan? And if so, are we going to have commercial ceiling heights on that first floor residential unit? Thank you.
Mr. Toad, you have quite a list there.
So I'll test my memory and see if I remember everything you asked. So with respect to the right-of-way, my understanding is that so the two lines that you see on the plan here, and going back to, I guess, to the first question, what's the basis, I guess, for what you're seeing on the screen here? So this is based on a survey of the land I understand the owners got when they purchased the property. And so that's what it's based on. I don't recall the age off the top of my head. I believe this plan is not that old, but it's still not new. So I think if there is a real dispute about the boundaries, that's something that could be confirmed by a surveyor. The owners have been in talks with their solicitor who did the real estate deal as well in terms of confirming those things. So that is something that we are working through with them and with staff. So there are two parts to the right-of-way, and that right-of-way has been in place for many, many years. The dash line belongs to this property over here, owned by Axion, and the undashed part here belongs to 556 Princess Street. So they're shared right-of-way mutually, one in favor of the other, so they both have access over that land. So it is a shared right-of-way. And the existing building, as I said, I'm not sure when the easement was created, but the building having been there for 100+ years, the easement must predate that. Otherwise, I doubt that they would have created an easement through somebody's building. But again, we don't know all the details of some of those things, so that's something that we can continue to work with staff in providing. I agree in terms of a door opening out onto a right-of-way, that could be problematic. So maybe the solution is to relocate the door to the rear of the building as it is now. So again, those are concerns that staff may share as well, and we can address with them. In terms of the ground floor commercial space, so where you have existing buildings, existing uses, they have certain, I guess, legal non-complying rights with respect to the ceiling height, for example. So the Super 8 was one where there was an existing building, and so the existing building was permitted to have or maintain that height, and then new construction along the street had to have the increased building height. So in this case, the existing building's proposed to be maintained. If it were to be torn down and rebuilt, I suspect in that situation there'd be a looking for increased ceiling height to accommodate commercial. So I guess the short answer is, since it's existing and not changing, no, the ceiling height's not proposed to change as part of this.
Do you know offhand what the ceiling height is in that first ground floor?
No, sorry, I do not. No.
And I think the last one had to do with parking. Will this be deeded parking on Alfred Street?
Yeah. So for you, any parking, off-site parking has to be registered basically through register on title of both properties to basically confirm that the parking is going to be reserved for that site. So, yeah.
And I would hope that that happens before a building permit, and it isn't, the building permit won't be issued. This may be a question to staff. And then there'll be a scramble before occupancy to locate the required spots. Yeah. Could you, perhaps staff can best answer that.
Let's see.
Ms. Diedrichson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The parking agreement would be registered before the building permit would be issued.
Thank you for the correct answer. That's good. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Thank you. Now, the way it works is during the public portion of the meeting, that's when we can ask all our questions and concerns. If something has come up in what has been said this evening, if you could write a letter to the planning staff saying, this is what I heard, this is my concern, so that they will respond to you. And that's Ms. Diedrichson, who is on this one. Thank you. So I will be closing the public portion of the meeting. I would suggest that that's where we have our planning staff, because we have public meetings, and tonight 4 of them. If we started into a debate of back and forth, we could be here for a long time. So that's why the process is. If something comes up during this, Ms. Diedrichson is the planner, and she will speak with you directly and address any issues that you may have. Okay? Thank you.
Just if there are further questions, I'll be out in the hallway right now. So feel free to approach me and chat there.
Thank you. So Mr. Toe will be out in the hall as soon as we finish this public meeting, and he will be there to speak with you directly. Okay, thank you. It will be on the record if you write it down, and it goes to our planning staff, and that it is on the record and will be part of the comprehensive report that will be prepared by staff. So all questions and comments will be in the comprehensive report with the planning responses. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Toe. And that will close this public meeting. And I'm going to open the second public meeting for this evening, and this is a application for zoning bylaw amendment, 1471, 1479 John Counter Boulevard and 16 Terry Fox Drive. And I'm not sure who's presenting. Oh, here we come. Thank you. Is it? Oh, did I turn? I apologize. I turned the page incorrectly. I'm sorry. This is the application for zoning bylaw amendment, 484 Days Road.
No problem.
And, hi, thank you. Please go ahead. I really need to go 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll just wait for the clerk to come back, and then if you're ready.
Anytime. Madam Chair, members of the committee, staff.
I'll just wait for a couple of seconds till Ms. Blumenberg returns.
Okay,
She's
sure.
just making sure things are okay in Memorial Hall. Thank you. Thank you very much, and we're ready now for you. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, staff, other members of the audience. My name is Ed O'Neill. I'm here to represent my wife, Sandra O'Neill, who owns the historical property at 484 Days Road through her company, SJO Enterprises Incorporated. We purchased this property in 1980. It is a historically designated stone house. And we are not proposing any changes to the exterior, and it would be up to any purchaser to make changes to the interior. Can you hear me all right? Okay, thank you. The purpose and the effect of the application is to permit, thank you, is to permit a broader range of neighborhood, commercial, and residential uses in the existing building on the subject property. Presently, the property is used as a dental office, an orthodontic office. And when we purchased it, we applied for a zone change from residential to a dental clinic with accessory dwelling. I have practiced there since 1980. I am presently working 2 days a week. The facility is much too large for that, so our purpose is to sell and move to a much smaller facility. The sale of the practice could be facilitated greatly by expanding the potential use of the building. It served me extremely well over that period of time with no complaints from surrounding neighbors, residential, the church, nor the nearby businesses. It has been a very positive addition to the community. The apartment, I should say the practice area is approximately 2,000 square feet, and the residential area on the second and third floor, small area on the third floor, is approximately 1,200 square feet. The future is to utilize this building so that it can be maintained as a heritage property in good shape. When we purchased it, it was in difficulties, let's say, so we had to totally renovate it into a beautiful building. We did tear off a sunroom and filled in a swimming pool and replaced the sunroom with a one-story stone and glass addition. Orthodontic facilities are somewhat different than other dental, general and specialty setups. Therefore, it's not particularly marketable to other areas of dental care. Actually, it's more suitable for use as perhaps a architectural engineering firm, a daycare, pharmacy, beauty salon, florist, because of the open space concept in an orthodontic office. The concerns that have been raised regarding parking of Our Lady of Lourdes Parish, which is directly to the north. There's a diagram on the letter of justification, or the report of justification, that shows that there are 26 parking spaces in the property, 2 of which would be committed to the apartment unit, leaving 24 for staff and patients or clients or business customers. When I was working full-time, I had a staff of 10, and we treated approximately 70 to 80 patients per day, and we never had a complaint about parking, nor a need to utilize the church parking lot next door. Many cars that there may be a concern about that, because one notices many cars parked there during the daytime, but these are the staff members of the Days Road Dental Clinic at 499 Days Road across the street. Patients who do park there sometimes are usually parishioners, parents of patients who are just used to parking there, or have their own wishes to park there. Presently, we have wonderful tenants in the apartment, perhaps overly conscientious, and they've complained to me a few times saying that the parking lot should be totally empty during the weekend when we're not there, but that the church has been using it as an overflow lot for those attending on Sundays and holy days and funerals. We have not made an issue of this in an effort to be a good neighbor, although we do have some concerns about the liability risks of it. But there's no parking problems that should worry the Our Lady of Lourdes Parish. Several of the concerns were regarding the traffic flow on Days Road, and I agree. Days Road has become, in those 35 years, very much more busy, and I guess unfortunately cars have become able to accelerate very quickly from a standstill. That is, I believe the main problem there is that Days Road is a major arterial route between Front Road and Bath Road and has little to do with the property at 484 Days Road. Two lines of traffic from Bath Road turn south and then converge or merge together south of our property, south of the entrance to Marion Homes. The only suggestion I can make would be that if through signage and arrows on the pavement, those turning left who are going through could be directed into the westerly lane, and those wishing to turn left into La Salle Plaza or the church or 484 Days Road or Marion Homes 480 Days Road could use the left lane safely. There was a notation about accidents, car accidents, and pedestrian accidents, some fatal, and this is certainly a concern. Although there have been several accidents in this area, interestingly, for our own staff and patients and service people, I can only recall 3 instances where anyone leaving or turning into our driveway have been involved. one would have to confirm this with police records, but I would certainly hear about it if some of our staff or patients were involved. To this issue, however, when the Marion Homes project was approved with a similar meeting such as this, the only request I had at the time was that I would ask the Marion Homes people to give me a letter that I should have access from their driveway into our parking lot in case traffic problems became an issue. And I have a letter stating that condition is available, but I have never exercised it. Regarding pedestrian deaths, which are certainly a concern, the need for sidewalks is evident. Perhaps a lighted crosswalk might be helpful at the corner traffic light. It is some distance to Bath Road. And there was a question arose, about Marion Homes tenants needing to walk in front of 484 Days Road. Well, in fact, Marion Homes has a path, a walkway from Marion Homes directly to the church property and easily accessing LaSalle Plaza. And also there is a walkway to the east to Gardner's Road, accessing the Gardner's town center, and another probably easier route to the LaSalle Plaza area as well. So there is no need for any person from Marion Homes to cross in front of 484 Days Road. This location has been good for me, and it should continue to serve residents in the area as it has for the past 35 years. The house was built in, the first part of the house was built in 1840, and the front, the more magnificent front part was built in 1870, so it's certainly a treasure. It's called the Peter Day's house, and his family and descendants lived there many years. And I assume that Days Road was probably named after that family. To ensure maintenance and continued occupation and utilization, it is needed that there be a good occupant with some financial needs or availabilities, and I feel a professional office, business office, or some uses that I had listed and were listed in the justification should be quite helpful. But before I finish, I would like to comment on the staff members of the planning department of the City of Kingston. We've been treated with the greatest of care, consideration, understanding, and helpfulness that we could ever wish for, especially when you're not too aware of procedures. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And could I hear from staff, please?
Yes, I can confirm that notice was provided in accordance with the Planning Act. Sign was posted on the property, and notices were sent to property owners within 120 meters. I've received 7 pieces of correspondence. 6 were provided in the addendum, and I've received 1 more at about 4 p.m. this afternoon.
Great, thank you very much. Questions from the committee? Councillor Neal.
Having read all of the correspondence,
Yes.
The main concern seems to be with traffic and parking. And I believe that when a comprehensive report comes forward, we will have a traffic study, as we won't be getting a traffic study on this particular file. Perhaps staff can clarify
Ms.
that.
Vendetti?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Given the volumes of traffic and the scale of business, scale of the proposal, that it's within the existing building and that the traffic volumes would be minor, there's no requirement for a traffic study in support of this application.
But the comprehensive report, I assume, will be circulated to city traffic engineers for comments.
Through you, Madam Chair, we will definitely have comments from the traffic engineer.
Thank you.
Any other members of the committee? Then I'd like to open the floor to members of the public. Are there members of the public who wish to ask questions or speak to this application? Seeing none, I would like to thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that will close this public meeting now, gentlemen.
Thank you.
The next public meeting is the application for zoning bylaw amendment, 1471, 1479 John Counter Boulevard, and 16 Cherry Fox Drive.
Madam Chair, committee members, planning staff, members of our community. My name is Paul Martin. I've got with me tonight Curtis Branscombe, and Curtis is going to give our presentation, and I will be available for comments and questions after. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Again, Paul, as Paul mentioned, I'm Curtis Branscombe. I'll be speaking on behalf of Bob Martin Construction in support of the application to expand permitted uses for the City Place offices. We're dealing with 5 parcels, all situated around the same area, so there's parts that maybe aren't as vital. I'll try to breeze over a little bit for the sake of time, and I'll trust that everybody asks questions if I've skipped over anything they thought was important. So we're going to go over just a brief background of the property, just to give people a bit of context if they're not familiar with the property. We will talk about the site overview and the reason for the application today, and then try to go over some of the policy and regulatory concerns. So that's the property from the corner of John Counter and Sir John A, which is City Place 1 you're looking at, with City Place 2 and 3 in the background. What we're going to be discussing today is simply expanding the list of permitted uses to include or allow for medical offices and clinics, or dental clinics as well are included in that. Some retail use such as pharmacies and restaurants, as well as expanding accessory use to 25% of total floor area. So a little bit about City Place. About a little over 20 years ago, almost 25 years ago, the first City Place building was put up, City Place 1 in 1993. Closely behind that was City Place 2 in 1997, and the third building is more recently completed. It was initially developed as a place for professionals to do business that was centrally located in the city. Currently it functions as such, offering tenants such as accountants, lawyers, financial advisors, different government agencies, and medical and healthcare providers in more of an administrative capacity. So to get a sense of what we're talking about, we have the 5 properties there. On the very north, the L-shaped building, that's 16 Terry Fox Drive, which used to be Goodyear Tire, and then it was a bingo. Then the 3 City Place buildings are just south to that, and 1479 is the other L-shaped building to the southwest, which used to be a Children's Aid Society. So 1471, 1475, I'm sure most have driven past it, and it's situated on Sir John A and John Counter Boulevard. It's located directly on a public transit route, and the city's done a fantastic job adding new bike lanes and walkways along that road, with plans to expand to a 4-lane road and bridge over the Via Rail overpass. The properties themselves, you can see, are very well manicured. They also have Norway maples lining the road, and it's a nice entrance into the city off of the 401 from Sir John A. you can see from those photos as well, there is ample off-street parking. And the buildings themselves are very accessible to anybody with mobility issues, and they do have 2 elevators servicing them in each building. 1479 is currently vacant, but is situated directly on John Counter Boulevard. It also has ample parking both in the front and in the back, and has a lot of the access to a lot of the same amenities described. The only thing I would note is that there are 2 entrances to that property, one fronting John Counter and one on a private laneway. 16 Terry Fox is situated at the corner of Sir John A. and Terry Fox Drive. Again, it was once the Bingo Town building, and it is now just on short-term lease for warehouse and storage space. So this is where we get to our reason for it, and it's quite simple why we're asking for this. Originally developed for these professional services, it has served that purpose. 16 Terry Fox Drive, again, Bingo isn't as popular as it once was, so it unfortunately had to close. 1479, Children's Aid Society decided to build and purchase their own building, as many of you may be aware, leaving that building vacant. But what drove us here today, there seems to be a large expansion in the province and this LIN network where they're trying to get different types of clinics and medical offices more accessible to members in the community and try to decentralize from the hospital in a certain capacity. And what we're finding from our perspective, we're by no means experts on the LIN program, but from our perspective, we're getting a lot of demand from these clinics and medical offices. And they want to come to this location because it is very central. They're able to offer services to people throughout the city of Kingston, as well as expand cities like Brockville, Belleville, and locations north of the city. We're very close to the 401, and it's very easy to direct people to these buildings, and they're highly visible. The other thing that it does offer, these medical clinics tend to cater to people that are elderly or do have mobility issues, and the buildings offer both ample parking and are very accessible. So it's a very attractive location for all those reasons. Not to mention, there is close proximity to the hospital, so if there is some sort of correlation, they can, it's very easy to direct people from the hospital to the clinic or vice versa, being located as reasonably close as you can get and still have this type of parking and amenity space. The second real big demand that we're finding is that people are seemingly shrinking the amount of office space per employee, just given the economic environment we're in. Companies are having to do more with less or the same, and you're finding more employees on a square foot of office space. So believe it or not, in those 3 office buildings, you have almost 600 workers coming to the building every single day. That doesn't include people that are coming to frequent those businesses. So along with that, what we're finding are the questions of where can I get a drink, where can I eat? And unfortunately, the way that the bylaw is right now, it's difficult for us to facilitate that for people, but we would love to. So again, the Bingo Center closed, Children's Aid Society bought their own building, and I think those are fairly straightforward. And the City of Kingston has been actively updating their policies through the official plan to be more in line with the provincial policy statement to encourage this type of mixed-use development, which I think this really resembles exactly that effort. Surrounding land uses, I think if you're familiar with the area, this is a section maybe I'll breeze over a little bit, but you see there is a bit of a mix of residential and some different commercial uses, self-storage, automotive, garage. The proposal, really, to reiterate, encourages this mixed-use development in an area that's defined as employment lands. So it's a great opportunity to bring other businesses in from outside the city that maybe want to open a clinic or dental office and just create different employment opportunities that service the community. It also aligns with the city's official plan for the intent of a business park industrial area. And it utilizes the existing infrastructure. There's no development being proposed here. It creates a very compact mixed-use development, which really makes a more livable area for everybody without having to expand our footprint or add any additional infrastructure, transit, or anything to that area. And again, just reiterating, we're not asking for any change to landscape or buildings, so it doesn't have any impacts as the official plan might describe. The existing bylaw, while it serves our purposes mostly, it does exclude specifically medical and dental offices and clinics. There's really no specific provision for commercial uses of any kind, and it limits accessory use to 10% of floor area. What we're seeking is to simply permit different professional services so people have an area to come, sort of a one-stop area to try to find these professional services that are very accessible and without restricting profession, because we are finding the demand still for medical and dental within these buildings. The commercial uses that we're talking about, we'd like to limit to 25% just to help, again, try to service the immediate area and limit the accessory use to 25%. So in conclusion, really the proposal, what we want to get across, is just being made essentially in response to market demand. It's what seemingly is needed to stimulate the area and satisfy what people are searching for. It aligns very well with provincial policy statement as well as the city's official plan initiatives to promote this type of mixed-use development in an employment land. Again, I reiterate it makes no expansion of footprint or additional burden on infrastructure. It's drawing new business because, again, we are finding that a lot of these inquiries are coming from different areas as well as some within Kingston. And all in all, it represents good planning. In our opinion, we ask that Council, the Planning Committee support this motion. Any questions?
Thank you very much for your presentation. Could I hear from staff, please? Sarko.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pursuant to the requirements of the Planning Act, a notice of this statutory public meeting was provided in the form of signs posted on the subject sites 20 days in advance of this meeting, and also notices were mailed out to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject properties. And to date, I have not received any written correspondence with respect to this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee? Councillor Osanek?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one question, and if the zoning amendment goes through and then you're able to have restaurants, do you see that you can still use the same entrances into your building, or which is off of John Counter Boulevard and off of Terry Fox Drive, or do you think you're going to need additional entrances like off of Sir John A?
The city has already guaranteed that we will have an entrance off of Sir John A. with regard to the widening of John Counter Boulevard. So we will have an entrance off of Sir John A. But that will certainly be ample. There's lights on Terry Fox, which allows people to get in and out quite nicely. And then, of course, as you guys continue to evolve on the John Counter widening, my understanding is there's more lights to be put on John Counter as well. So there should be lots of breaks in the traffic. Thank you.
Thanks. And Councillor Neal?
Thank you. I support the idea of a business park expanding for auxiliary uses, because clearly they're in demand with your tenants. The 25% increase of accessory uses and 25% for potential retail display, those, I'm assuming, include all of those things that you've listed as new allowed uses. Is that correct? So would the pharmacy, for instance, be part of that 25%?
Thank you for your question. I guess I'm going to try to glean a little bit. That 25% that you're referring to for display, I guess, would refer to the entire parcel. And that was something that was included in the proposal because we are limiting ourselves as far as all 5 parcels acting as one under the zoning bylaw amendment, and 2 of those properties being 16 Terry Fox and 1479 John Counter Boulevard being vacant or semi-vacant. We don't know what the future use is necessarily going to be. So we're trying to leave it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm just wondering if those are over and above those other uses that we're adding to the kind of shopping list of things that you can do in the buildings. So is it 25% on top of that pharmacy that moves in, or the?
Our understanding is no, it isn't. There'd be 25% for each one of those 2 uses, and we'd have to stay within that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. My other question, and the only thing that gave me pause in the whole application, because I support the idea, I guess my concern is having the potential for a drive-through restaurant, because I know there's been lots of debate over the years about Sir John A. not becoming a kind of strip of fast food restaurants for the 401 trade. So I'm concerned that in my mind, you would have to have a different footprint than, I would assume, than the buildings that exist now. So if we approve that as a potential use, we're approving a change in the foreseen uses along Sir John A., which was meant to be the primary entranceway to the city. Could you comment on that?
Thank you again. Again, really, we're trying to expand some possibilities, and the drive-through, again, was driven by a request we had, not recently, but in the past when we didn't have proper zoning. I believe, and I may have to refer to city staff, if this does go through and we do decide down the road to put a drive-through, and I believe there would be further site control plan required and studies to be done to actually build and use a drive-through.
Ms. Archibald?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If a drive-through is permitted as a use in this site-specific zoning, it will have to comply with requirements of zoning bylaw number 8499, which sets out setback distances from residential zones as well as the requirement for site plan control. Thank you.
Sorry, Ms. Venditti.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Just to expand on that, if we can have a discussion with the applicant about the accessory retail floor areas and those types of things. Just to clarify, that's calculated based on the floor area of the uses, not the land area. So depending on the gross floor area within the buildings that we're talking about, there would be certain allowances for 25% complementary use, as well as the potential for some retail for products that are manufactured or sold there. So we have to look at that and work that through. So that'll come back in more detail with the comprehensive report. With respect to the potential for a drive-through on that site, a drive-through is considered an accessory use to a restaurant, but we would look at, if we do end up supporting some type of a drive-through on the site, where our entrances would be, where it would best be located on the site, what type of setbacks and buffering would be required, because as you've indicated, and we do have official plan policies that speak to Sir John A. being a main entrance into the city, we would want to see a high level of design and setback and buffering go into any type of a drive-through facility there.
So locating a drive-through would require an OP amendment? It wouldn't? Okay, thank you.
The other thing, if I can just comment for a moment, Councillor Neal, I believe there is a drive-through already on Sir John A. In a few different places. So there's the gas station, there's Tim Hortons, there's A&W.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? I'd like to open the floor to members of the public. Are there any members of the public? Mr. Dixon?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm in favor of the plan. I'm very impressed with the report. The presentation was first rate. Looks like a very good business plan. I just have one question and one possible idea. The chair can rule me out of order on that if she wishes. You're looking to expand the number of uses, and from the slides, it appears as if there is quite a bit of parking on the site. You do have, as you say, 600 employees using the buildings as they are now. So what I'm wondering is the supply of parking going to be adequate for the potential future uses that you're looking to build in? That's the question. And my idea is taking advantage of your location. You're at the corner of Sir John A. Macdonald Boulevard and John Counter Boulevard, which are honored two very historic figures in our city. So you're at the corner of John and John, in effect. So I'm wondering if you're looking maybe for a new aspect of this, if there's some way of basically bringing that in. You have two historic figures and you're at the intersection of the streets named for them. So it's just an idea. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'll just wait to see if there are any members of the public who wish to speak as well. Is there anyone else who wishes to comment? Okay, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you very much for your questions and comments. To address the parking, we did do a review of the number of parking spaces required, and medical dental clinics are actually a lesser requirement for as far as parking stalls required per square foot of floor space, and I think we actually are under more stringent requirements in our current state, and we've left that the same. We haven't asked for any change to parking requirements.
Seeing no other questions from the committee, I would like to thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
And I'll close this public meeting. And if there is anyone in Memorial Hall who wishes to come for the Milford Drive, who's in Memorial Hall, please come now. No? Okay, thank you. And our final public meeting is application for zoning bylaw amendment, 965 Milford Drive, and we'll follow the same plan that we will have the presentation. Members of the committee we'll hear from staff, members of the committee, and then we will open the floor to members of the public. So if you do have questions or comments, please be sure to come up. Be sure to have signed in, and any written comments, please make sure staff have them. So we will begin with the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nancy Cornish, and I'm a planner with IBI Group. This is Mark Tao. He's also with IBI Group, and we're here to present an application for zoning bylaw amendment on behalf of Dawn House for a property at 965 Milford Drive. We also have Maggie McLaren, the executive director of the organization, as well as some other board members and members of the organization. So we're requesting a change from a site-specific general commercial C2-22 zone to a site-specific medium-density residential R4 zone in order to permit residential as well as office and supporting uses. To give you a brief overview of the applicant, Dawn House, it is a Kingston-based charitable organization that was established in 1986, and it has provided safe accommodations for women for over 30 years. Their mandate is that everyone should have safe, affordable, and accessible housing. Some history on the organization itself. In the past, Dawn House operated a 24-hour emergency shelter at 302 Victoria Street. In 2013, the city's housing strategy came out, and the focus shifted more towards providing permanent, affordable housing and away from shelter accommodations, and striving for the housing first approach. Since the 24-hour emergency shelter was no longer in line with the city's directive, the shelter aspect of Dawn House organization closed in October 2015. Dawn House has since changed its mandate from providing emergency shelter housing to providing affordable permanent housing, as well as the other supporting services. At the moment, they're undergoing a name change to reflect their new organizational strategy. So the name on the application at this time is still Dawn House Women's Shelter. However, there is no longer a shelter component. Right now, they're operating out of a temporary location at 829 Norwest Road, but they have identified this new site, 965 Milford Drive, to accommodate their proposed project. They do have a conditional offer to purchase the existing building, and the purchase of the building is subject to the property being rezoned. So the site is located on the southwest corner of Bay Ridge Drive and Milford Drive, indicated here in red. To summarize the development, they will be adaptively reusing the existing building on site, so no new buildings are proposed. The interior renovations will be made in order to accommodate 3 aspects of Dawn House: 9 affordable studio apartments, 1 transitional housing unit, as well as office and ancillary services and common space for Dawn House. And I'll speak in more detail about each of these uses in a moment. Generally, improvements to the property, in addition to the interior renovations, will be aesthetic changes to the exterior, reducing the parking area and increasing green space, as well as adding some new landscaping features and private amenity areas. This is the site plan. This is the existing building here. As you can see, that's the only structure proposed on site. Some of the parking at the rear has been reduced, and we now have green space. These will be the private amenity areas at the front of the building. We also have some new landscaping, and all the trees on site will be maintained. This is a rendering of the west facade, very similar to what is existing, but new cladding on the building, new roofing, paint, and some other exterior improvements. So the first component that I spoke about is the affordable housing component. It will include 9 affordable studio apartments. Each will have a washroom, kitchen, sleeping area. They'll all have independent entrances and exits. In order for them to be affordable, rent is subsidized and meets the definition of affordable housing as per the city official plan. The housing is intended to be permanent supportive housing. Tenants will be women who need and want supports, and they will be allowed to live there permanently. Supports will be provided on site through Dawn House, in addition to any other portable supports they may already have. The intention of this housing is to help tenants stabilize their housing situation and to maintain housing tenure into the future. The second component is the transitional housing. This includes 1 transitional housing unit. It's intended for short-term housing for up to 7 women. There's 7 private rooms, but they do have shared washroom, kitchen, and amenity space areas. The women staying in this portion of Dawn House are awaiting access to permanent affordable housing. So the length of their stay varies depending on when this type of housing becomes available. So for instance, it could be from 2 months anywhere to 2 years. Supports will be provided again on site through Dawn House, as well as any portable supports they may already have. Tenants staying in the transitional unit will be subject to a participation agreement, and there will be staff on site 24 hours a day. The last component is the office and community space for Dawn House. This will include administrative offices for the organization, as well as supporting services such as counseling, addictions and mental health support, women's health and well-being, as well as other services provided by partnering with other organizations that may operate through Dawn House. There will also be community space for activities such as life skills training, exercise programs, and support group meetings. So why did Dawn House select 965 Milford Drive? There's a number of reasons, and the first being that it's located on a Kingston Transit Express route, so it provides direct access to other parts of the city, including downtown, the Kingston Center, and other amenities. It's also close to retail amenities and service, specifically at Bay Ridge Drive and Taylor Kidd. On the corner there's a grocery store, bank, Shoppers Drug Mart, dollar store, lots of other uses. The existing building and site layout is well suited to the use. As you saw in the rendering, the existing structure kind of looks like a big house. And the interior can be renovated to meet their needs. It's located in a safe neighborhood, and supports will be provided on site, and any other supports will be accessible by transit, again with the express route located right out the door. We also note that the Westwoods neighborhood was identified as a candidate neighborhood for non-market rate housing in the locational analysis study completed as part of the municipal housing strategy. How is the proposed development consistent with the city's housing strategy? Well, it creates additional supportable, affordable housing units within the city. It provides support services for persons who are homeless or those at risk of homelessness. And it also helps to distribute affordable housing units across the city in an integrated manner. At this point, I'll turn it over to my colleague Mark to speak to you about some of the planning components.
Thanks, Nancy. So I'll talk about two planning documents from the city tonight. One is the city's official plan, which is the overarching policy document for the city that kind of generally directs where development should happen. And the second is the zoning bylaw, which is the more specific document that implements things like lot sizes, setbacks, building heights, etc. So the first document, the official plan, designates the property as district commercial. Despite the name district commercial, it does allow certain residential uses, including the proposed medium density residential use, as well as office and supporting uses. So the official plan designation permits and contemplates the use as part of the district commercial designation. So there are a number of policies in the official plan that speak to how development should proceed and where. So going through those tests, we found that the policy supports the proposed development, so it increases and diversifies the city's stock of affordable housing. It reuses a vacant building within the city boundary on existing services. It's compatible with existing services or existing adjacent uses. It's not anticipated to create adverse effects. It meets the needs of the site users, and being on a transit line and well connected to active transportation, it also supports and fosters use of those alternative modes of transportation. So, in conclusion, we believe the request for the amendment conforms to the policies of the plan. The zoning bylaw, as Nancy mentioned, identifies the property as being in a C2 site-specific general commercial zone, which is similar to some of the other uses in the area. There's another office next door, and then further south along Bay Ridge Drive, there's kind of a cluster of commercial uses. So the property on the corner in the C2 zone is proposed to be rezoned to a site-specific medium-density residential zone. So the site-specific relief is specifically to address the permitted uses. So the residential use is permitted in the R4 zone, but we're asking for the office use for Dawn House to be included as well. Also for dwelling unit area, accessory uses, existing side yards, and parking. So with respect to the permitted uses, the property existing has been a commercial property, and the commercial component is proposed to continue in the form of an office. The addition to it is to allow for a residential use, hence the rezoning for R4. We believe the uses are compatible with the existing uses. It's consistent with the intent of the official plan for types of uses in that area. With respect to the dwelling units, there is a minimum, prefacing this, I guess, from it, a lot of zoning bylaws have minimum unit sizes This is typical in older zoning bylaws. Newer zoning bylaws tend to move away from having minimum building unit sizes. This particular zoning bylaw is one of the older ones from Kingston Township. So it does have a minimum unit size at 400 square feet. So the proposed studio units are 215 to 327 square feet. They would still have to meet building code in terms of minimum bedroom sizes, exiting, et cetera. So that would be something that's designed or has been designed from the architect to comply and also be checked through the building permit process. The units will accommodate a sleeping, kitchen, washroom, as you would expect. It also provides direct access through independent exits, or a single independent exit for the dwelling units themselves, common to those units and separate from the rest of the building. There will be private outdoor amenity space provided on site, and the units themselves will provide affordable, independent private accommodations. So these three are relatively minor amendments. The first is as part of the garden activity area on the site that's proposed. We're going to have a garden shed. The owners felt, or Don House felt, that the optimal location for the garden shed would be next to the building. There's a minimum setback of 1.2 meters from a building, so they're asking just to remove that required setback. Again, it would still be subject to building code, fire code requirements. The interior side yard and the yards where parking are permitted, those are existing conditions. The building and the parking lot, how they're laid out, don't meet the current standard, or don't meet the standard under the R4 zone, I'm sorry. They do comply with the existing zoning, so it's just a matter of kind of transferring that existing permission to recognize the existing building. So in conclusion, we're of the opinion the proposal is consistent with the PPS, conforms to the policies of the official plan, is compatible with the existing adjacent uses, it's consistent with the city's housing policies, and represents good planning, is in the public interest. And we ask that Planning Committee recommend this for approval to Council when the time comes. Thank you.
And could I hear from staff, please?
Through you, Madam Chair, notice of this statutory public meeting was provided in accordance with the Planning Act. Signs were posted on the subject site 20 days in advance of the meeting, as well as notices were sent by mail to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property. I have received 18 pieces of written correspondence from members of the public. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And members of the committee, do you have some questions? I'll start with Councillor Osanek. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Through you, some questions for Mr. Toll, probably, and some of them are about site plan. And so I just wondered, for instance, garbage. How does garbage get handled? Are there going to be any bike racks? And also privacy concerns. So I know that Don House, they want to try to maximize the privacy of their tenants the same way that the residents on Milford want to maximize their privacy. So what I've heard is that there's going to be a privacy fence, but I don't know if one already exists there or if some new fencing is going to be added or not. Thank you.
Thank you. So through you, Madam Chair, the issue or the question about garbage, that's actually not something that we've specifically contemplated in the plan that I'm aware of. So there is opportunity, though, for outdoor garbage storage if needed, if it can't be accommodated within existing areas inside the building now. So there is room for that on site. With respect to bicycle parking, the same, there's room for, and the architect, I believe, has contemplated areas for that, but they aren't shown again on the site plan, but there would be sufficient room on site for bicycle parking. With respect to privacy areas, so along Bay Ridge Drive, these kind of yellow areas here are proposed to be kind of the private screened areas for residents of the building. So it's either going to be appropriate types of fencing or landscaping or a mix of both to provide that.
Thank you. So when it does go into the site plan details, if the garbage could be like as far away from the homes as possible, maybe more on that south side, that's more up against the commercial buildings to the south, and if it could be kind of camouflaged in any way too, if there's a dumpster with a little, fence around it, that would be good for the neighborhood, I think. And my second question then is about, let's see, so some concerns that I've heard is that this is a zoning application amendment, right, from commercial to medium density. And if this zoning is allowed, then I've heard concerns, well, what would then open the door to if Dawn House sold the property somewhere down the road to a high rise and Homestead come and put a big apartment right next on this corner. So I just wondered, is the zoning, is it going to be basically specific to the 16 units, and that's medium density, so if anything greater goes, then that applicant would have to come to planning committee just like tonight and, present their proposal?
And, thank you for the question through you, Madam Chair. And that was something that came up at the open house that Dawn House hosted last week. It's a good question and a concern. So through the site-specific zoning, the intention is to, first of all, I guess the C4 zone does have standard setbacks, for example, for property line separations and required buffering from other types of or densities of land use. So those provisions will apply, and I think the intention is through the site-specific zoning, the C4-X zone, that it would tie the building down to more or less what exists today. There may be the way you write a zoning bylaw does kind of limit you in terms of setbacks, so you can't say that every single setback, you can't list out every single setback, I guess, but the intention would be to set out the minimum setbacks consistent with what's in place today. Same thing with the building height, more or less. So that would provide that assurance that what's there, because it's being rezoned, doesn't mean it's all of a sudden going to allow for something much bigger or denser. So.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Neal.
Thank you. Just very quickly, and this may be a question for staff to weigh in on. In the 12 years I've been on council, in the 90s and now again, in my world, the issues are primarily about student housing. But it's my understanding, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, that the Ontario Human Rights Code strictly applies, and that all planning decisions have to be based on the Planning Act and sound planning parameters, and cannot address tenancy. Is that an accurate statement?
Through you, Madam Chair, the provincial policy statement in the implementation clearly states that the PPS shall be implemented in a manner that is consistent with the Ontario Human Rights Code. As well, the Planning Act only gives us the authority to zone for land uses, not zone for people. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a quick comment. I've represented core districts over the years, and where there are a number of supportive housing and a number of shelters, and I can't recall getting a complaint after they've become operational. There were concerns and complaints prior to them opening. And a point in fact is Lily's Place, a women's shelter or family shelter rather, at Kirkpatrick and King's Court. The neighbors actually planted a garden and made curtains for the shelter when it first opened. And I think if you talk to neighbors, immediate neighbors in the core of the city next to some of these service providers, their worst concerns have never materialized, and they've been good neighbors. So So I hope that we're able to weigh this purely on criteria of sound land use planning and not get sidetracked by who might be living there. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, I'd like to open the floor to the members of the public. We have a microphone on this side and again on the other side. If anyone would like to speak with questions or concerns, please come forward, and we will ask Mr. Toe to address any of these at the end of the meeting, or at the end of the public portion. Thank you. Please come to the microphone.
Thank you.
And your name and address, please.
Yes. Good evening. My name is Danielle Latulippe, and I am the homeowner and resident of 970 Westminster Place. I just wanted to say that on the last Thursday, the 28th of April, I had the pleasure of attending the open house forum with the committee and personnel from the Down House, along with other stakeholders. There was quite a few of us in attendance, some in support of the bylaw zoning change application and some against. The discussions that ensued were quite interesting, however, not as informative as I would have expected. Right from the onset, the staff or representative from the Don House was not as transparent as we would have liked to have seen. The word shelter was used on and off to the point where it was no longer certain if the Don House was really a shelter or whether it was transitioning to their new business model. Having said all of that, one of the concerns that I have that came out of this meeting was that I was not totally convinced that the Don House was in a financial position to sustain such a large property in the long term. When asked questions about their financial planning, the answers were very abstract. I understand that they rely heavily on government funding, and from year to year, budgets change. They also rely on fundraising and donations from community partners. But when they were asked certain questions, they were not able to provide any kind of numbers, any ideas of fundraising events, and probable community partners. It seemed like there was a lot of speculation as to how they were actually going to generate funding to support this endeavor. I somewhat sensed that their approach was, if the city changes the zoning to commercial, then we will work at the funding, as opposed to, we have the funding in place, so let's approach the city to change the zoning bylaw. Kind of the cart before the horse. I would think that any organization approaching the city's planning committee to request a zoning change would have a sound business plan in place. It was indicated at the meeting that the acquisition of this property would be without a mortgage. In other words, they were buying it flat out. However, there are real costs associated with upkeep, maintenance, utilities, food, sundries, wages. I also wanted to ask the question more to the city about the fact that the Don House is a charitable organization. My understanding is that they would be exempt from the municipal and property taxes. According to the real estate listing for this property, taxes are somewhere in the vicinity of $27,000 a year. As a taxpayer in that community, my taxes go up every year. So not only are we funding the Don House, but we are also walking away from $27,000 worth of taxes that could be used in our neighborhood to support our schools and everything and the other things. Since the meeting, I've had an opportunity to do some research about the Don House. Unfortunately, it appears that regardless of the articles I read and the source of those articles, the underlying message was consistent. Financial instability, viability concerns, governance concerns, and constant changing of board of directors. I believe that these are all concerns that have an impact on the future. So I'm asking that when we consider whether or not to change the zoning bylaw, we think not only of next week, next month, next year, but a couple of years down the road. If the Don House can't pull this off for financial reasons, and we've changed the zoning bylaw, what are we going to be looking at then? The representatives of the Don House tug deep at our hearts with their stories. There is no doubt that these individuals are very passionate about what they do and their cause, and for that they should be commended. There is no doubt that there is a need in society and that homelessness is a very serious concern. However, the decision to change this bylaw has to be looked in the bigger scope of things. This is not just an emotional decision, but a business decision. It needs to be looked at both from a business perspective, the best interest of the community, and a social one. I often wonder, is there not another property in the city that would be more affordable, that would allow them to spend their money better instead of spending it on infrastructure to support that large property, and it is very large? Would that money not be better spent on additional programs for these women? I would like for you to take this into consideration. And just a couple of other points with no real order of importance. As a resident in that community, I wanted to say that my husband and I have been there for 17 years. We chose that location based on a lot of criteria. It's been a very safe neighborhood, and I know now that when we talk amongst our neighbors, there is concern about safety. There is concern about, fire trucks and police cars and all of those things, possibly frequenting that establishment more often. And as a homeowner and as an investor, there is now concern about how easy is it going to be to resell our home and is there going to be a negative impact on the resale value? So I thank you for your time. These were some points that I wanted to bring forward. More specifically, that we ask ourselves the question, what if? And this is a business decision along with a social one. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a quasi-council meeting. I would ask that we hold any applause. Yes, sir, if you'd like to come to the microphone, please.
Good evening, Madam Chair. My name is Qazi Islam, and I don't know whether this is the right time for me to speak.
Could I just ask your address, please, sir? Your address as well?
I live on 885 Rowantree Crescent. I was going to give that in my preamble. So anyway, I have been the resident of that area which Kinnelly developed, and I am the first owner, and I have been living there since 82. So what I saw, all this development around us, and saw what Kinnelly's office turned into doctor's office, we benefited from it. And that kind of operation for a commercial C2 or whatever zoning that has, I think it benefited the whole neighborhood. And since then, school grew around us, parks were developed, particularly on my street. There are some housing where a lot of young people move in, and hence we get feeder for the school, which is the young children. And I have seen, living in Kingston City, many schools closed for reason that the community grew old and people are not moving in with young families, and that was a sort of negative thing for any school, so school closed. Our area is always thriving because of all these things. People love to live in that area. And I heard the stories that even initially, somehow it's getting to us, this information is going that for human rights codes, the accommodation and all this is paramount. But at the same time, when submission comes, something like this, upfront, that kind of thing is flashing on our face, saying, do not make such decision which we would be based on something that will infringe upon the rights of others. But there are two types of rights. There's a rights for individual, and the rights for others cannot be just put on individual, is trying to cope with many other things, including their health issues, their children being raised in an area, elderly people are living in the area. But nowhere I saw, in this submission, they talked about the surroundings. Always they're talking about the easy access, bus route, food mart, shoppers. There's no shortage of those anywhere, but they're not showing what is in the surrounding. If you look at the Google map, and you will see the whole area is full of residential area, but only one chunk of this property is zoned as business area for something that they could be serving the resident. Now, getting back to the proposal, and I happen to be an engineer, and I have seen a lot of development, a lot of argument about things we can serve, things we will provide, but at the same time, when the people move in, they do things, and somebody already spoke about rezoning if there is a need for. So what is going to lead to what, we don't know. But my concern here is this. If you look at the area, Berries Drive and Milford Drive, that has been spoken so much, but why not speak of Lancaster Drive, Rowan Tree Crescent? It didn't come to any document that this is what it is, and you go beyond, there is a park for children to play. You go beyond, there's a school. You go on the other side, there's school. And it draws a lot of young people and children all day long, sometimes late in the night. And as I understand, this facility is not going to be just a regular renter's facility. It would be somebody would have need, and that need has to be met. And also a transition for 2 months or maybe 2 years, who knows. But all these things will bring in the need for the support. And this support, I think is spoken about already, that these children go around, we move freely. Now, all of a sudden, now we see all these fire trucks coming, police cars coming, paramedics coming, and I see that would be something detrimental for that area and our mental peace. So I leave it to that because somebody is waiting to speak, so I should not take too much of my time. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir?
Thank you, Lady Chair and councillors of the City of Kingston. My name is James Ward. I live at 489 Victoria Street, actually just up the road from the previous Dawn House. Funnily enough, I lived on the street for 5 years and travelled past the old Dawn House every day by foot or by bicycle or with my children or in the car. And I didn't even know it was a hostel until 6 months ago when somebody told me. It just looked like another house on the street. There were no fire trucks or police cars or anything. It just blended into the community. And actually, when I found out it was a hostel, I was quite proud that that facility existed in my neighborhood, because not everyone's as fortunate as I am, and who knows, maybe my children may need something there, or other people's children need that facility in our city. And it's, in terms of property values, unfortunately, the area I live in is actually quite expensive, and I think I don't think anybody on that street would say that the presence of the Dawn House had in any way had a negative impact on their property values, and I would be delighted to speak to anybody in the neighborhood of Milford Drive, of Bay Ridge Drive and Milford Drive, about my experiences of Dawn House as being in my immediate neighborhood. And, you know, we should remember too, you know, there's over 400 homeless people in this city and over 1,200 people on waiting lists for affordable housing. And this isn't, you know, this is something I think that our community and any community should see as something that's an important part of what we should offer as a community. That's what I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Dixon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm speaking in favor of the proposal. I think it's sound. It's certainly necessary. I like the design. That section of town needs this sort of facility. I just have one question. The planners mentioned that the minimum guidelines for the size of units are 400 square feet in this part of Kingston. And the design is proposing a 215 to 327 square foot range based on the presentation. So my question is this: could the design be modified to meet the minimum standard for size, and would that maybe improve the living values and the ambiance of living there? So that's one question. And then question two, if that were done with a 400 square foot minimum size of unit, how many places would be lost? Would it be 2 or 3 possible places lost, or just wondering if that could be quantified? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir?
My name is Barry Thompson. I live at 977 Milford Drive, right next door to Dawn House. Okay, thank you very much. You know, I hear so many things, and it seems to be going on and on and on, and people are saying the same things over and over and over, and we recognize, you know, and sympathize with the plight of abused, addicted, or otherwise afflicted women, and we all realize their right to refuge and shelter, medical treatment. That right, however, does not mean it is related to a specific institution or location. And it seems to be, since I've worked in the municipality throughout on many committees, including C2 and rezoning, and what I see here is something that never happened before as far as transparency is concerned. And we seem to be the ones that are getting blamed because we don't agree with the positioning and location of the Dawn House. And really, everybody's talking about human rights. This is not human rights. This is a bylaw issue. And in transition goes back to Dawn House and what the application is for. And, you know, we as householders have the right also. We have the right to health, safety of person and property. This is all stated in the Human Rights Code, with the municipalities have authority and human rights and obligations. Under the Municipal Act 2001 and the City of Toronto Act 2006, municipalities have a broad power to pass bylaws, and that is subject to certain limits. on matters such as health, safety, and well-being of the municipality, and to protect persons and property. You have those rights. I have those rights, and so do the people on the edge of society. They have those rights. So we have the same rights, and these got to be taken into consideration. I'm hearing here, oh, I lived in a house, I lived near a shelter, I did this, I did that. It never the price of the property always went up, and this is bad science, because this was taken in areas of downtown Kingston, downtown Toronto, downtown London, where it's sort of a cosmopolitan type society encompassing all race, and people love to live in that diverse society. And even in the city of Kingston, you don't try to buy a house in the city. It doesn't matter who is in the area, people love the diversity. So all of a sudden, we take those same science and apply it to a single family dwelling in a bedroom community. And all of a sudden they say, don't worry, Barry, your house is going to go up in price. Okay, let's just be realistic here based on that perception. I live next door. I'm 1 inch from the property on an angle on my driveway. So I'm 1 inch. That's close enough. The next door and what they propose, first of all, is they propose security, lights, and there's 3 houses directly behind or beside the Don House. And 24 hours we're going to be lit up like a Christmas tree. And I'm sitting there saying, okay, fine. The next thing I look at is, the safety issue, because that is the most important part of it, and everybody's downplaying it. But when we look at the units themselves, where there's 9 people, 7, and all the different people in there, we find that before, when we put the bylaw together in the C2 zoning, we meant that this is a single family dwelling. Our street is short. Where they are is right on the corner and right at the stoplight and an entrance on Milford. So if you start putting that many people, and Milford Drive at that end is very busy. This is a street that all the other traffic from the subdivision goes down to get onto Gardner's Road. So that road is busy. And you start increasing the density and the cars and the people. And we're looking at getting 2 weeks. Don House have had 6 months, and all of a sudden we got 2 weeks to respond. It's just not fair to try to get the people together who have no idea what this is about. Haven't got any idea. I put a petition together, I went door to door, and the people thought it was a women's shelter for abused women with children. And it's door after door after door after door. And that perception's been put out there. And it's not fair. We're trying to defend ourselves. And then they talk about a safety issue. And when we get down to the safety issue, let's say at the previous Don House, and some of the things that were put together regarding the problems. The problems lie with, they're talking about sitting down and spending a lot of time talking to ambulances and police cars, and everybody's heard it, and fire departments. That's true. That's true. My wife is a nurse. She's worked a lot in areas like that. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at a situation where they don't see the danger involved in drug addiction and in mental health. And they were saying, at lots of places, they're saying that where they relate or go backwards is like about the 60% level for the first time. I asked at the meeting, I asked about the safety, and I pushed him. And the director said, well, you know, when you're dealing with people like this, you have to, I got to get the word right, you have to expect that there's going to be trouble. We don't want trouble. And whatever people say, that was said. That's a fact.
Sir, I think what we need to do is stick with the zoning.
Okay.
That this is
Sorry,
a zoning
you're right.
permit.
So when we have to stick with the zoning, they have to take consideration of our rights. And is it safe? Is it well-being about the municipality? It's about person. It's about health. All of these things put together. And if you break the trust in those particular areas, and there are areas that we put together that we know that for sure, those areas are in our favor as far as our municipality is concerned. So this zoning has to take our rights into consideration. And we have kids in the area, we have parks, we have a daycare. This is all within 50 feet of that. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, we will be asking for a response on the issues that each person has brought up. Yes, sir?
Thanks. My name is Sina. I live at 12 Wellington Street. I grew up pretty close to that area up until university. I used to bike up Old Colony. Actually, my first crush lived on Rowan Street. I frequented that area quite a bit and went to the tennis courts nearby off Barrage Drive. And I go by this quite often. I want to kind of focus on just land use and planning. And for now, the proposal that I'm looking at there looks quite good. You know, there's more green space. In fact, there's a residential house, I guess to the left of that image. And now we have like some shrubs, a bit more privacy, some more trees. Looks like parking has been reduced a bit, so there's more amenity area. If you drive or walk up Barrage Drive, right now the place doesn't look that appealing, right? Not much has been done to it, but you're seeing right here that significant resources are going to be putting into this space to make it more habitable, to make it more welcoming and in line with the community. A few comments were made about, in terms of security lights, safety and such. Let's focus on safety. There used to be a medical clinic there, and I'm sure that the traffic going up and down Milford Drive back then would be much, and going into that space would be much more than it would be if this was the Don House. Because you have patients going into the clinic and leaving every 30 minutes, 40 minutes. There was also a pharmacy there. So I think it's an improvement. In terms of value of properties, I think someone mentioned that earlier. I don't think it's going to be affecting it whatsoever. But in terms of over and over, people have been mentioning human rights, rights. Everyone's got a right. And what we're doing, what's happening right now is something for the community. And overall, I think that from a land use and planning perspective, it's looking good, and there's kind of thoughtful design that's been put into it, especially along Barrage Drive, to develop those two private spaces. And overall, I really like the increase in amenity space and more green space in that area. Sina. Yes.
And, sorry.
Do you have a question?
Want to continue?
Yeah. I work at Rogers and Trainer Commercial Realty Brokerage. I was the former president of the Kingston Landlords Association, and I sit on the CMHC round committee providing their annual report for housing in the Kingston area. So I've seen this stuff a lot, and I'm providing my input from some background experience.
Thank you very much. Is there yes, ma'am, would you like to come up to the microphone, please?
Is it on? Okay.
Hi, my name is Libby Alexander. I live at 995 Westminster Place. I've actually lived there for over 30 years, so I grew up there. And I was actually there before the Metro Plaza was even the Loeb Plaza. So I've seen a lot of change in that area, and I'd like to add my voice in support of the initiative by Dawn House to provide safe and affordable housing. Growing up there, I learned that I was really privileged to live in such a safe neighborhood, and that a lot of other children did not have access to. So I think it elevates all of us as a community when we work together towards inclusion and improve the living conditions of all of our members, instead of just reverting to an us and them mentality that I feel is expressed in discussions of safety and threat. I invite all of you to ask whose safety matters more, and consider who is the more vulnerable party here in these discussions. And that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir?
My name is John Winship. I live at 837 Rowan Tree Crescent. This question has already been touched upon, but I would like to reiterate it specifically. After the meeting last week, I have done further research to look at Dawn House. I was blissfully unaware of a lot of the issues associated with it. And one of the things that has come to concern me a lot is that in what I'm finding of information, first of all, the Dawn House website has not changed at all from, it appears, quite some time. So it still appears as a women's shelter. And we understand that there is a process of repurposing going on. But in the meantime, there has been what it appears in everything that I can find, including discussions and recommendations and reports to council, that Dawn House has had a lot of difficulties in organizing and presenting their budgetary process. And I see that as a concern because it seems that that's manifest also in how they are repurposing themselves, that they're talking about it, but I don't see any evidence at this point that Dawn House has repurposed. When we heard from the staff last week, it was pretty clear that their mentality is still thinking shelter. And so my concern and what I'd like to, as I say, I think it was touched upon earlier, but I would like to express it specifically to Planning Council, and that is, it seems that if Planning Committee approves this application, they will then obligate City Council to funding Dawn House as a part of the 10-year housing program that is now underway. And that does seem to be putting the horse before the cart, because it would seem that Dawn House should have to demonstrate to council that they have reiterated who and what they are, what their mandate is, and how they function. I realize that's a difficulty. How do you do that when you're not operating out of a new facility? But the concern is that if they say they've repurposed, it's approved by Planning Committee, then is City Council obligated now to fund Dawn House? Because there's certainly been some controversy, it would seem, as far as that aspect of approval from City Council. And on top of that, if City Council decides, no, we're not going to fund, and funding becomes an issue, the expression that what would happen to the property if Dawn House could not support it, suggestion that, well, someone could come in and build a high-rise to have that intensity of housing. That, to me, doesn't seem so much of a concern, because a high-rise is going to be very difficult to get approved for a property like that. But we would have approved a very high density of residential in that property, and other things could happen. Not necessarily a shelter, Who knows what it could be, but it would then be zoned for that intensity of very small accommodations for that number of people. And I think that's something that City Council has to really think carefully. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Madam Chair, members of the Planning Committee, councillors, my name is Bruce Wheeler, and I live at 861 Rowan Tree Crescent, and I've lived there for the last 200 years. I'm going to keep this short. The group from the shelter and the Planning Committee had months and months and months to prepare their submissions, to do their studies, and then it rolled out into the neighborhood like a grenade with the pin out. And reaction drove me to doing a survey on the street that I live on. Barry, the previous speaker, did the same thing. My point is simply that statistics, if that's what we want to use, would reflect that 95% of the people are not in favor of that shelter. They're not in favor of Don House locating there. The reasons that they're not in favor of it have already been voiced by several other speakers, so I won't go back into them. But statistically, and that's what you want, proof that the neighborhood, which does have a say, and as much as entitlement figures into all of our lives these days, it doesn't really trump the privileges of the property owners who have been there for so long. The attitude of Don House is that they do trump the privileges. Just one last sentence, okay?
It was a reminder that we are
a
dealing
letter
with
from
the land
somebody
issue.
from Don, sorry?
We are dealing with the land issue, not
Okay.
who trumps
As a
who.
planning committee, somebody by the name of Jamie Blondin, who works for Don House. As for residents who state a fear of losing property value, they should be deeply, deeply ashamed of themselves. Property value should not trump the value of a woman's life in need. I don't think the residents are doing that. I don't think they intend to do that. I don't think they ever would do that. But the point is made that a forceful representation of Don House's intentions does not constitute a need for us to accept them patently. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, would you like to speak, sir?
My name is Matthew Clark. I live at 984 Milford Drive. So my primary concern is that the zoning amendment as it's stated right now has 9 apartment dwellings that none of them meet the current space requirements, which I know that has been stated already. So what I would ask the Planning Committee to do, and I think it is an important recommendation, is to seek a requirement that the apartment dwellings that will be going in do at the very least comply to the 400 square foot requirement. I think people living in affordable housing, they deserve decent accommodations. It's not acceptable to just zone 9 apartment dwellings that are, some of them, almost half the size of what we would expect another developer to zone. So I think that's a reasonable request. And also just for the Planning Committee to consider the possibility of, in a sustainable city, to create like a walkable environment, to have some mix of commercial development remain on the property so that there is a mix of residential and commercial. It seems to be that's the way that the city would like to zone a lot of other areas. And there is a lot of foot traffic in Westwood subdivision, which I think would appreciate that. So those 2 points, the square footage of the dwellings should be reflected in the zoning amendment, and a mix of commercial and residential development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak? This is your chance. Mr. Toe will be replying to all the questions, and then the committee will be invited to speak again. So if you want to say, please come to the microphone.
This is just going to be a very short one. My name is Thomas Hubbard. I live at 970 Westminster Place. Our property butts right against the back quarter of that property there. The reason why we purchased our property in the first place was because it was commercial property. We go to work in the daytime. There's cars, there's parking, everything's going on. By the time we get home at nighttime, there's nobody there. We have that privacy in our backyard. That's exactly what we had, and that's what we put up with for the last 17 years. I know that the place has been empty for 5 years, and we've appreciated that. But still, even the building right behind us, it's a doctor's office. On weekends, there's no cars there. We have our privacy. On the weekdays, when we go to work, they're at work. When we come home, we can hop into the pool, and we don't have anybody looking over our fence. When we get in the hot tub at nighttime, we don't have anybody staring at us from the second-story window like they have over at the Don House. Well, supposed Don House. We enjoyed our privacy. And one thing that my wife didn't mention, and neither did this gentleman, is that we did a survey in the area of people against the Don House going in there. I have a partial list here. This gentleman has a page and a half of people that are against the Don House. When I picked up the agenda for this evening, I was just wondering why there was more pro-Don House in there instead of negative Don House. Because my letter's not in there, my wife's letter's not in there, our neighbor's letter's not in there, but it's all letters in there pro-Don House. How did that happen? I don't know. So that's all I wanted to state.
I believe
there's a few in there.
The addendum does have all the correspondence. We should probably.
Thank you.
There's some at the back table with all the
That's the one
correspondence.
I picked up from.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am. Would you like to come and speak?
My name is Caitlin Clark, and I also live at 984 Milford Drive. And my question is in relation to another presentation that we saw this evening. There's amenity space requirements for units. And I was wondering, given that this proposal is for 9 separate residences with another 7-unit transitional housing unit, what would the amenities space, green space requirements be for a multi-residential unit or a building with that many units? What the requirements would be for that in relation to amenities and green space?
Thank you. We'll get Mr. Toe to answer that one. Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Seeing no other members of the public, I'm going to hand it back to the committee to ask if there are any. Oh, sorry, I'm going to ask Mr. Toe to answer all the questions and see if we have the same check marks to answer.
So just want to thank everybody who did come out tonight and who came out to the meeting last week as well. Change is always difficult, whether it's something like this or it's a new subdivision or infill development in the urban area. It always brings a lot of questions and uncertainty to those who live there about what that means. So we'll try to answer some of those questions tonight, and if there's follow-up questions, we'll try to answer them as well through staff. They can provide those questions to us, and we can provide a response in writing. So just with respect to the finances, the short answer to that is when you're contemplating a rezoning or official plan amendment or a subdivision, the finances aren't something that figures into whether it's approved or not. So the question is the use proposed, in this case, the residential use and the associated office use, is that appropriate for the site or not? Whether the new owner goes belly up in a year or they're there for 50 years has no bearing on whether or not the application is good planning or not. And that's just how the Planning Act works, how zoning amendments work. So that being said, I think some answers were provided as much as possible at the meeting last week by Don House. And I guess the truth of that partly is as well, with any nonprofit, funding is never a surety. There is a dependence on outside sources, but as was noted, the intention is to buy this property mortgage-free. As was noted last week as well, the way it works with affordable housing units is that they are, although the tenants only pay a reduced rate, they are topped up, or the rate of the rental being paid is topped up to the landowner, the landlord, to wherever the market rate is. So automatically that means that all these dwelling units are going to be bringing in market rent, which goes to help support running the building as any market rent building would provide. So there is that financial income as well, based on occupancy, regardless of program funding. There are other questions about finances, but as I said, they're hard to get into without giving them more credibility, I guess, than they should be given under a zoning process, regardless of whether they're legitimate questions or not broadly. With respect to loss of commercial spaces in the community and the impact on the availability of services to residents, we'll note that the existing property has been vacant, has been marketed actively for around 5 years without any apparent success. In the meantime, a number of new commercial uses have gone in the area, including Shoppers Drug Mart, including a new dental clinic at the corner of Taylor Kidd and Collins Bay Road, which would serve that same community. So over time, uses will come and go. Sometimes it means that the uses of the property will change through rezoning. Sometimes it just means within the existing building, new tenants will come in. The official plan does contemplate residential on this property. So although the zoning is commercial, it can be residential as well, as per the planning document, the official plan that sets out the broad vision for the neighborhood. In terms of the minimum size of the bedroom units from Mr. Dixon, and also a follow-up from a nearby resident, so the 400 square feet dwelling unit size, as I said, was set, as many older bylaws have, based on a variety of different reasons. More and more in modern developments, you're seeing studio apartments that are smaller than that are shrinking in that. I myself have been involved in multiple projects where there have been bachelor apartments that are less than something like 400 square feet. Part of it goes to affordability, and part of it goes to just more efficiency of design. The intention here is to try to provide studio apartments for the residents. They're making use of some of the existing space in the building. I'm not sure if the bylaw was, or if the bylaw requirement was met, how many units would be lost. Just based on purely the numbers and the ratio, I would guess about a third would be lost, so from 9 to about 6. But as I said, from a building code, fire code perspective, that is something that the units as proposed would be compliant with. And the question, I guess, in terms of, is it appropriate to have people living in units that are smaller than 400 square feet? Given the lack of affordable housing units and the long waiting list, I guess it's a question of maybe less than optimal space for some, but is it better than living in a shelter or affordable housing unit waiting for a unit? So in terms of providing good, usable, safe space, that is what these units are intended to do. And they will have access, although the units are small, they will have access to a significant amount of amenity space, both indoors and outdoors. so they aren't limited to just that dwelling unit as you would be in your home with your living room, etc. They do have the ability to use other common indoor space to kind of extend their living room, I guess, if you will. With respect to lighting impacts on adjacent property, so through the site plan approvals, which is where you show where lighting will be, staff will look at that and also consider concerns of residents. And there is a standard requirement essentially that any new lighting that comes or that's proposed has to be shielded with a cutoff shieldings to ensure that there isn't light overspray into other properties. So that is something that if you have a concern about that, talk to staff, let them know, and certainly that's something that they will be able to look at. With respect to a few questions were raised about safety in terms of having residents being so close to the street in this building and increased traffic. With respect to activity generated from this site, I believe one of the other speakers had said that certainly a commercial use generally has less traffic generation than a residential use, and we do anticipate that to be the case here as well. And that from an engineering traffic perspective, that is the MTO, generally look at traffic generation rates from different uses. That is the standard, that residential uses generate less activity than commercial uses. With respect to residents in the building being impacted by being close to the road, there will be fencing and buffering in appropriate areas along Bay Ridge Drive. And in terms of setbacks, in urban areas, there are many residential units that are closer to the road than this. So it's not something that would be unusual on the whole for residential development in terms of setbacks from the road. Somebody had brought up the question about this still being a shelter. And just to emphasize again, yes, the old web page is still up there. Don House has historically operated as a shelter, but they are no longer. And again, really it comes back to what does the zoning allow? So the zoning only allows residential dwelling units. It doesn't allow a shelter. So that would be a compliance issue if somebody were to operate it as a shelter. There are different things under the zoning bylaw. And I guess the other assurance to that is, since we are just considering the use, if someone were to come in the future, say Don House does move, if someone were to come into the future and propose something, the question has been answered already: is residential appropriate in that site regardless of the tenant? So concerns about future uses or future tenants or owners are answered through this process because it sets out what the zoning and the uses are permitted to be. So one question about general privacy concerns, views from second floor windows. The building is 2 stories. A lot of the residences in the neighborhood are also 2 stories. So in terms of privacy impacts, often we look at what are the existing privacy impacts in the neighborhood. So if you're proposing a 4-story building next to a 2-story building, does that constitute a privacy impact? Potentially it would. You can mitigate that with increased setbacks, for example, so that you can't actually have that view down into your neighbor's yard. In this case, it's a 2-story building next to other 1.5 to 2-story buildings, and there's a substantial setback between the building and any neighboring properties. So in terms of privacy impacts from the building to other yards, I cannot deem that that's a valid or likely to be an actual impact or negative impact. In terms of the amenity space requirements, I don't have the number offhand, but it is, we did check, we go through the zoning and see what's required per dwelling unit, and this does more than meet what's required for amenity space per dwelling unit. It's usually based on, in this zoning bylaw, it's based on the size of the units, and then the space is identified in terms of outdoor, indoor space. So I can get you the number if you'd like, but I don't have it offhand. But it does satisfy what's required by the bylaw. So I think in terms of planning related questions, those are what I have. So if there's something I missed, I can, okay.
And I will open it back up to the committee. Councillor Neal?
Yes. I think you've addressed some of the issues. The discussion about trying to keep it at its present land use designation, I think the market speaks for itself. It's been vacant for 5 years. So something needs to be done with the property. The talk about how small the units are, I know in the core of the city, in the area I represent, units are getting smaller and smaller. Both condominiums and apartments are shrinking. And our Housing First units that we've acquired are much less than 400 square feet. So we have to keep in mind that our zoning bylaws are decades old, and our comprehensive zoning bylaw that everybody will have an opportunity to speak to in a public process over the next couple of years will address some of those issues. As far as business plans go, I can point out the private sector is never asked for a business plan when they come to planning. We've never, ever, and I don't believe the Planning Act even allows us to ask those questions. The reality is I can point out 4 major developments that either were or are currently under receivership because they ran out of money before they ran out of development. And so to demand a different thing from Don House, I think wouldn't be appropriate and wouldn't be according to the Planning Act. I will say, though, that they were required by Social Services and Housing to hire a consultant and to present a business plan to the city. So that's probably a higher level of scrutiny than any private developer is ever given. As for the mention that they won't be paying taxes, I believe only churches in this city don't pay taxes, if my understanding. I know not-for-profit co-ops that I've been involved in the past pay a fair market tax. Not-for-profit housing pays taxes. So it's a bit of a myth out there that if you call yourself a charity, you don't have to pay taxes. Only the federal and provincial government in this city get to not pay taxes, and churches. That's the end of the list. And anybody who wishes to correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding as far as, pardon me? Yeah, the province under the provincial colleges and universities and federal government buildings, and I believe hospitals fall under the provincial tax exemption as well. But all residential in this city pays taxes. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? And with that, I will close this public meeting, and thank you both very much for your presentations. And thank you, everyone, for participating. And again, please be sure to have your name at the back so that staff, you can be apprised of any of the developments. There will be no decision made for a period of time. We still have some business for the Planning Committee meeting, so I will wait about 3 minutes and then we will begin the regular business portion of the Planning Committee. Okay, we will now begin the regular Planning Committee meeting, the business portion. I'll call the meeting to order and ask for approval of the agenda, please. Councillor McLaren, seconded by Councillor Osanek. All those in favor? And that's carried. We don't have minutes this evening. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, no delegations, but we do have a briefing from Paul Lowe's, SGL Planning and Design, and Rowan Faludi. Urban Metrics, providing a briefing regarding commercial land review final report.
Okay, thank you very much, members of Planning Committee. We're going to be providing a brief presentation of the results of our commercial land use review for the City of Kingston, a study that we completed about a month ago. Now, the commercial land use review, the purpose of it was really to look at the supply and demand for residential space in the City of Kingston. It was a very extensive study. It involved not only a typical analysis involving looking at population growth, expenditure growth, the inventory of space, looking at commercial land uses, but it also involved an extensive public and stakeholder engagement program. So we conducted one-on-one stakeholder interviews with various landowners and business owners in Kingston. We conducted a stakeholder workshop. We held two public open houses on June 17th and March 7th. We undertook an online consumer survey of Kingston residents with over 400 responses. And we also conducted downtown on-street surveys in August and September with about 200 responses. So just to recap the current situation in terms of the commercial land supply in Kingston, what we found is that the market is sufficiently supplied. When you look at all the key retailers who would be in a community of this size, pretty much every one of them is here. So there's not a lot of opportunity to attract new types of retailers to the community unless it might be new retailers that may be new to Canada. Big box retailing is a mature concept. It probably peaked a few years ago, and we're not seeing a huge growth in big box developments outside of new growth markets. Overall, the vacancy rate in Kingston is pretty stable. It's right now just over 6%, which is a little bit on the high side, but it's certainly not a concern, and I think it reflects a fairly balanced market. There are some weaknesses in some of the older plazas on Bath Road, for example, and the downtown vacancy rate of 12% is considered high, but part of it is reflective of the fact that the downtown has been under a very extensive construction program, and a lot of the buildings downtown are still re-tenanting. What we also found, which I think is good news for the city, is that downtown is still the primary destination for a lot of the city's commercial activity. When we ask people where they do their shopping for various kinds of things like supermarkets and clothing, drugstores and so forth, the downtown scored remarkably well. There's a very minimal outflow of retail dollars by Kingston residents, so most of Kingston retail expenditures are being made in the city of Kingston, with the exception of fashion, which is fairly common, and people are going to Toronto and Montreal and Ottawa, to places where they have stores that aren't available in Kingston, but still the outflow, even in fashion, is still relatively low. So in terms of opportunities for future commercial growth in Kingston, there is modest population growth that has been projected, and we use the population projections by the Center for Spatial Economics, which was the consultant that the city engaged to do its population projections. Downtown is still the jewel of the retail structure. What we found is that it still is a very healthy downtown. Because of the size of the student population and the workforce and the residential population, combined with tourism, it has a lot of retailers that you wouldn't typically find in downtowns of this size. We found that there was a lot of support for residential infill in the downtown to support the retail sector. Enclosed malls, such as the Cataraqui Centre, are still extremely strong in Canada. There have been very few enclosed malls built in the last 20 years, and what we're seeing is that the owners of these malls are still investing heavily in their expansion and refurbishment. Downtown is also a very key restaurant and entertainment district in Kingston, and that's a very important part of the tourism infrastructure as well as the infrastructure support residents. So there are some challenges to the retail sector in Kingston. Population growth is uncertain. What we've seen is that the city has a fairly rapidly aging population, and that if it wasn't for in-migration, there would be a decline in its population. And because Kingston is a relatively small and relatively isolated community, it is very dependent on growth from its government sector, its military sector, and business and attraction. And if not for those sectors, it would be very difficult to attract new growth and to sustain growth in the community. There's minimal opportunity to recapture sales leaving the city because, as I mentioned, Kingston residents are already spending the vast majority of their expenditures in the city, so there's not really much opportunity to attract, to recapture sales that are leaving the city. Downtown, as we all know, is recovering from construction. There are some vacancies, and there are some challenges with that. Services are outpacing retail store growth, and we see that in communities all over Canada, that the services sector, as opposed to the pure retail, the stores selling things like apparel and electronics and books and so forth, that sector is growing a lot slower than the services sector. So as a result, in terms of retailing in the city, we're seeing a contraction of not necessarily a contraction, but a slowdown of growth in pure retail. And incomes and the size of Kingston limit new retail openings. It's a relatively small city. The incomes are very moderate, so there aren't the opportunities to attract things, say, such as Macy or Nordstrom's or Saks and some of those kind of uses that are being attracted to the larger communities. So when we looked at the demand and supply, and we looked at the supply of land in Kingston that was designated for commercial uses, and we converted that into potential development space, there's about a 2.3 million square foot supply of commercial space in the city. We compared that with the demand, so based on population growth anticipated by 2041, it would only support about 1.3 million square feet. So there's effectively an oversupply of commercial space, commercial lands of about 1 million square feet. Now, we're not saying that all of the space that we've identified is suitable for all types of commercial development. So we're not saying that there should be a moratorium on designated new commercial space, but what we are saying is the city should be very cautious in its approach to designating new commercial space because there is a very significant amount of surplus space on the market. In terms of what we found from public stakeholder and consumer survey findings, we found that there was support for more neighborhood and convenience retailers, pedestrian retail areas accessed by transit, residential development in the downtown core, and more investment in the downtown core by both the private sector and the public sector. And there seems to be an appetite for new mixed-use development. Now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Mr. Lowe's, who's going to talk about the vacant lands, and he's going to go through some of our planning policy recommendations.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and the few remaining members of the public. Thank you for sticking around. We divided the project up. Mr. Flutie and Urban Metrics did much of the commercial analysis. We focused on the policy aspect. We also looked at the land supply. So there was two aspects when Mr. Flutie talked about the vacancy and what is the supply of vacant space. There's existing built space and vacant built space, like the last application you heard that was sitting there for 5 years. There's also the vacant land space, and you've got a fair amount of vacant land. And this map shows just a summary of all the spaces. In the document that has been presented to you, you will see there's a detailed inventory of each and every vacant property in Kingston, and also analysis of the appropriateness of each of those sites for continued usages of commercial use. And you'll see that it's largely focused in 4 areas, as you see on the map. And also, when you look at the specific designation of the sites, you'll find that the vast majority is in the arterial commercial designation, some large properties. You also see that there's quite a large number that are very small properties. Those are in the downtown and other locations. Often, even if we were able to absorb a lot of the vacant commercial space, there's always going to be some sites that remain vacant. Either they become vacant, or they remain vacant. Some of these small sites may just not be attractive for commercial uses. So you're always going to have some vacant land. But it's quite clear that at 76 hectares, you have a lot of vacant land, particularly when we look at the needs for the long-term needs for commercial space. We have a fair amount of oversupply of commercial lands. So I just want to go very briefly through our recommendations that are in the report. There is a lot of recommendations. We get into some very minor recommendations, very site-specific, policy-specific recommendations. I didn't want to go through all of those with you tonight, so I've grouped them more into themes. First theme on the policy side is maintain the commercial focus and vibrancy of the downtown. As Mr. Flutie said, that's the jewel in your crown of the commercial space. We heard it loudly from all the public and the stakeholders. It's a vibrant downtown, particularly when we compare it to many other municipalities. There's some things we suggest, obviously, and we heard it from the public, trying to encourage more mixed use, more residential development. We also focused on other aspects to try and get the trends. Currently, your official plan tries to discourage large box retailers. We think there is an opportunity for large box. It really is the built form and the controls on built form and how you allow for a larger box in the downtown, but make sure that the pedestrian activity on the street is maintained, and there's a number of ways to do that. The other key policy theme is preventing an oversupply and protect your successful commercial areas. And you have policies requiring market studies. We're also recommending that when a commercial developer comes along, not only doing a market study, but also requiring the developer to look at your other current vacant lands. Is there an opportunity to go on those other vacant lands and use up that land supply rather than designating new sites? As Mr. Flutie said, we're not saying no to future designations. We just need to have some very strict tests to ensure that the oversupply isn't exacerbated. Create more pedestrian-oriented retail areas, not just in your downtowns and your main streets, but really this is a focus for all commercial areas to look at to trying to be more attractive to the pedestrian and not just the automobile. Support creation of mixed-use areas, as I mentioned, is a key theme in a number of the commercial designations and not just the downtown. And encourage more convenience neighborhood scale commercial uses. Those are in your residential areas to encourage that so it's a more walkable retail space. You can walk to it and get your daily convenience needs. In terms of the zoning bylaw, again, we had a number of probably more minor suggestions and tweaking to the various zoning bylaws that you have. Many of those are to implement the recommended official plan policies. Others are to clarify the range of permitted uses. Others are to get some consistency and encourage. Sorry, I don't have my glasses, so I have to lean back to look at the screen if you see me leaning back. And ensure the appropriateness of the range of permitted uses. So make sure those range of permitted uses are applicable and appropriate for that zone that fits in with the overall designation. Improve streetscapes. There's a number of requirements in the zoning about improving streetscapes, landscaping, bringing buildings close to the street in certain areas, particularly in main streets, requiring a certain amount of fenestration to create that activity, the vibrancy on the street, the pedestrian activity, and allow for future intensification in your commercial areas. That is the presentation. Thank you very much, committee.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor McLaren.
Hi, if you could just go back to that map where you had a list of all the, or you showed where all the commercial zones are. I noticed that the airport is not highlighted there, but I understand there's a lot of potential commercial zone there. Is that by design?
This was focusing on the specific commercial designations. I know there is aspects in the airport that can be also permitted, but we focused on specific commercial designations of those, the arterial commercial, the district commercial, the regional commercial, the Main Street commercial. So that's focusing, this vacancy is focusing on those areas.
Okay, so if we were to include the airport, that would make the oversupply greater at this point?
Considerably.
Okay, considerably, thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Neal.
Yes, I represent the Williamsville district, and I guess I have two concerns. One is that you've identified a clear oversupply, current oversupply, but as we develop what we're calling nodes and corridors along the transit routes, I would assume there'll be a demand or a shifting of retail and commercial activity into those areas where we intensify population. And do you speak to that in the report? And is there an anticipated, so the supply may shift, but we may continue to have an oversupply? Is that an accurate consideration?
Through you, Madam Chair. First, on the first question, would increased population require more space? Absolutely. And certain neighborhoods, absolutely. In places such as historic Main Street, such as Williamsville, you may see that space that's previously been vacated may be taken over by residential, as we heard in the first application this morning. That gets repurposed back to commercial when the dollars, it's all about dollars. And the dollars are either the amount of income that people have in the neighborhood or the total amount of people creating more dollars. More dollars you have, the more amount of retail you have, the more the retailers are going to want to come. And if you see vibrant main streets, it's because there's the dollars in the neighborhood around it to support, or there's the tourists coming in. Downtown Kingston's got a bit of both. Other retail strips, it's really about the population around it. So the more you can increase that population, the more you create more need for retail space in that main street. Unlike, if you have more population in an area, it may support other retail as well. So you'll have your Main Street retail that would be supported. We have more Main Street retail. You may have more district or regional commercial space as well in other locations. Overall, it's a good thing. It'll absorb your retail space, but you'll have differences in different neighborhoods and different areas of the community. And in terms of, and Mr. Flutie can talk to this much more than I, but in terms of the retail trends, we're seeing significant trends for retail space to go on to main streets, where the population, where the retail dollars support it. There's a big push by major national chains to go and look at locations on main streets. So it's not unplausible, it's happening, and we can see it happening here as well.
And like the third submission that we had today, I'm assuming that chronically underutilized or vacant commercial sites can in fact supply and I'll look to staff for this, can in fact become lower use, considered lower use residential, or be converted to away from the retail or commercial designations.
Through you, Madam Chair. Absolutely. We actually recommended a number of sites in our appendix that could be considered for other uses from commercial that we don't see are long-term viable commercial sites or vacant sites, or we don't see that. And yes, they can be repurposed for a variety of residential uses.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I apologize for coming on our busiest planning meeting night.
Thanks. Any other? Councillor Allen.
Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for the report. I found it quite interesting reading, actually. And so one of the pieces of interest I have is actually when we're looking at the recommendations in the C3 zone to eliminate the 20% lot coverage. Could you just give a little more background as to why municipalities are looking to do this and what the logic is behind removing that minimum lot coverage in entirety, right? So there's no limitation at all on lot coverage, and how that and why we might support that in our upcoming zoning bylaw changes.
Through you, Madam Chair. Commercial, you want to intensify commercial, and if you look to the basis of the PPS, it tells us to intensify sites. I mean, most people associate that with residential, but it also applies to our commercial industrial areas as well. If we can use the same sites and intensify those uses, in our opinion, it's a good thing. You'll likely create, as more intense sites, a more pedestrian-friendly site, a more pedestrian-oriented site, and you can intensify. You can probably get up to about 30% coverage with just ground-related parking, still having sufficient landscaping. Above that, you're looking at structured parking. And that's not a bad thing. We're seeing more and more greenfield sites considering structured parking. You're seeing a lot of existing sites, major regional centers across Ontario, considering structured parking. Even district scale type centers considering structured parking. Why? Cost of land, lack of availability of land, the whole pressure for intensifying, and it creates a potential for a much more active, much more intense commercial site. It's a good thing. So that's why we recommend getting rid of the coverage. If there's a concern for the amount of space, we say control that through the overall floor space amount on a site. Don't limit it by coverage.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm the rural councillor, and you had a couple recommendations around converting the one zone to a rural commercial zone, but you didn't indicate whether we should be, I guess we probably aren't trying to identify more commercial lands in the rural area because, again, the intensification process that we're trying to go under. Is there a strategy to look at identifying commercial areas in the rural area, or do we want to sort of continue to direct that towards the arterial functions that are south of the 401 here in Kingston?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's always can be a need for some rural commercial because you have some population there. There's restrictions on that in your official plan, but you may still need some. But it'll be more of a site-specific aspect, a site-specific application to be considered, and staff can consider that. So we weren't making recommendations for any major commercial in the rural area. Any major urban-style commercial should be directed to your settlement area, to your city, in their urban area boundary. But there still may need to be some rural commercial uses on a site-specific area, and I think you can still have that, consider that on an application basis.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation.
You're very welcome.
Very thorough. Thank you. And we do have a recommendation from staff to accept the commercial land review final report. Moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Allen. All those in favor? Thank you. And that passes. Thank you very much. And we have no motions. We have no notices of motion. We have no other business. Many items of correspondence were added in the edits. And the next meeting is May 19th, which is a public meeting on the official plan. Adjournment. Councillor Neal. Yes. Councillor Allen. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Thanks.